Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée de plus brillant exploit. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate that one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My pleasure indeed.
Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, none this evening.
I entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councilor Kenny, seconded by Councilor Bodner. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest tonight? Being none indicated, we would record accordingly. Motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of the whole 27-15 held on December 14, 2015. Motion, please. Councilor Kenny, second by Councilor Emery. Yes. All those in favor of that last motion? Carried. The first order of business this evening is a special meeting of council with a public hearing under the Planning Act. Designated for today, Monday, June 25th. And at this time, I call upon oh, you're already ahead of me. Thank you, Dan. Would you please proceed with the introduction of the public hearing, please?
Thank you, and good evening to you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and those in attendance this evening. The purpose of this meeting is being held pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act. That is considered an application by Lawrence Snyder for property municipally known as 3894 Forks Road, also known as part of Lots 7, 8, and 9 in Concession 5. What Mr. Snyder is proposing to do is to have permission to have a mobile home for permanent year-round living purposes. Method of tonight's meeting was given in accordance with Section 34, subsection 12, 13, and 14 of the Planning Act, and Section 3 of Ontario Regulation 545/06. Notice on the property was placed on December 21st of last year, and all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property were mailed notice. The explanation to be followed this evening, Mr. Mayor, is I will present Planning and Development Report 2016-11. We will hear any comments from the applicant if he so chooses. We will then receive questions of clarification to myself or to the applicant. We will then open the floor up to members of the public if they wish to address council. I will then give a written notice announcement respecting requirements for notification. I'll give a brief explanation of future meetings to be followed, and then there will be the conclusion of the public meeting under the Planning Act. This time, Mr. Mayor, I would like to present Planning and Development Report 2016-11. I indicated what the application proposes, what the property, where the property was located. You will see the property in pink that is owned by Mr. Snyder, which is subject to this application, on the north side of Forks Road. You'll see the rail line right away. Briefly, the policies that affect this proposal is the City of Port Colborne's official plan and zoning bylaw designate and zone the property as agricultural. The bylaw permits, in addition to agricultural uses, greenhouses, one single detached dwelling, farm machinery and sales, kennels, wayside pits in subject to the provisions of the Pits and Quarries Act, and medical marijuana production facility is the other permitted use on the property. Again, the official plan is agricultural, which supports all forms of agricultural related uses on the property. It's important to note that the subject property did have a single detached dwelling on it, which was destroyed by fire in 2014, unfortunately. This photo here, you will see the subject property, and at one time where the dwelling was located, you can see it's behind a stand of trees. This photo is from 2014 from the edge of the property. The regional policy plan, again, as well, I should say, designates this land as agricultural. It's located in the good general area for agricultural purposes. It's also recognized under the region's environmental mapping as an environmental conservation area. To the north of the property is a floodplain that is recognized by the region. We also recognize that as well in our official plan as well. The zoning is still agricultural. We have not yet updated our zoning bylaw. Section 4.13 of the zoning bylaw prohibits a mobile home for permanent year-round living purposes. That's why the application is before us, to have permission to have a mobile home on the property. Upon notice to the neighbors, I can report that no comments have been received from any resident. Following comments have been received from the agencies that were circulated. The city's engineering services state if a grading plan is required under the building permit, then engineering would review at that time. They also report there are no drainage concerns. The building division indicates a building permit is required for the placement of this building on site, complete with drawings showing the foundation and anchorage system being used. The unit is built to the mobile home standard and would comply with the Ontario Building Code. The city's fire and emergency services indicate that they have no concerns. These drawings here will show the structure that is presently placed on the property. Again, this photo was supplied by the applicant and is shown from Forks Road. The next photo will again show council the actual subject mobile home that's being proposed, and another image as well. Comments from the Niagara region indicate that under the PPS, this land is also recognized as agricultural. They have no objection to the proposal from a regional or provincial planning perspective. However, they do note some following considerations for council's information. The region's private sewage system inspection staff indicate that they've reviewed the proposed zoning bylaw, and there is no record found of any existing sewage system on site for the previous dwelling. During our inspection, it was determined that the property contains an outhouse connected to a holding tank. The holding tank does not meet the requirements of the Ontario Building Code, and therefore a new sewage system will need to be installed to service the proposed mobile home. There is enough usable land available on the subject property for the installation of a Class 4 septic tile bed and tank. And they also state if the application is approved, the owner will be required to submit a septic system permit application, including a detailed design, to the Regional Planning and Development Services Department for review and approval. And the existing holding tank and outhouse will also need to be properly decommissioned. Finally, the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority have provided thorough comments. I will do my best to actually summarize them. They are attached to the report. They do indicate that the property is traversed by the Young Drain in 2 locations and therefore is impacted by the floodplain associated with the drain and subject to the current floodplain management policies of the NPCA. They note that the property is under the floodplain elevation of 180.64 meters. They also note that in accordance with policy 3.18.1, that any building or structure which is located in the floodplain and has been destroyed for reasons other than flooding may be allowed to be rebuilt, provided the building cannot be relocated in an area outside of the floodplain as determined by Conservation Authority. They indicate that they issued permit number 3682 on November 10th, 2015 for the purpose of replacing a demolished home with a mobile home within the same approximate footprint. As such, they are satisfied that the subject mobile home structure to be located in the most appropriate area on site meets the requirements of NPCA policy. They do note that in order to recognize the floodplain hazard, they would recommend that a hazard zone be applied to that portion of the property with the floodplain. They also note that the drain itself is identified as type 2 important fish habitat, and that classification requires a 50-meter development setback from the edge of the drain. That mapping indicates that the mobile home is located more than 50 meters from the edge of the drains impacting the property. They do note that a significant portion of the site, including the proposed location for the new structure, has been identified as a potential natural heritage corridor that Regional Policy 7.B.1.13 states that where development or site alteration is proposed or near the potential natural heritage corridor, the corridor shall be considered in the development review process. In this case, the NPCA notes that the proposed structure is to replace a structure destroyed by fire and further will be constructed in a similar building envelope as the previous dwelling, and as such will not negatively impact the potential natural heritage corridor. And finally, they do not have any objections to the application and note that they would like the hazard zone to be included for the floodplain portion. Canadian Niagara Power has stated that any new or upgraded overhead underground electrical plant is required to service the site, and there may be costs incurred by the applicant. And finally, CN Rail states that the site is not ideal for residential or other sensitive uses. While we do not oppose this specific proposal, they do note that, and they note that a setback of 15 meters from the railway right-of-way should be effectuated as a safety measure to ensure the well-being of the occupant. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report. I think I've provided council with enough information to get an understanding of what's being proposed. But if any member of council has any questions to myself for clarification, I'll be able to take that now.
Are there any questions, Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dan. Dan, in this case, I think this, for Mr. Snyder's circumstances and this piece of property, it makes a lot of sense for what he's asking. But my question is, how does this then set the municipality up for someone else that may come and ask for a mobile home to be put on a piece of property someplace? Is it dealt as one-offs, or does it set a precedent, or how does that set us up for anything?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bodnar, any proposal to allow a mobile home anywhere in the municipality except for Sherkston Shores, Pleasant Beach Campground would need to come back to council for the same zoning approval if council does want to give it approval. each application it's based on its own merits, based on location, based on neighboring comments, based on what's being proposed, and essentially it would be the standard that the municipality wants to set for single detached dwelling uses for permanent year-round living. So it's really going to be something that council would have to consider if another applicant would come forward. All that would need to be weighed before a decision or recommendation could be brought for council to make a decision.
Councillor Potter.
So I guess I didn't quite hear what I was wanting to hear. How does that set us up for we approved it this time and next time we have to? Or are you saying one-offs all the way, one doesn't affect the other?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Bond, right now it's one-offs. Right now our zoning bylaw prohibits them. So if one was to propose one at the building permit stage, they would need council's approval. Whether or not someone is then going to come back and say, you did it for this applicant, this property owner, why can't I get that same permission? I know the one application we had 2 years ago for the Shirkston Motel, at the time it was Sandman, council did give approval for a mobile home. That owner did not pursue it because it was subject to an agreement that needed to be in place to address the concerns that were raised by the neighbors at the public meeting. So council gave that permission subject to a holding provision on that property.
Any other questions? Councillor Butters. Or Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In discussions with Mr. Schneider, I too think that this is really the perfect solution for this gentleman. This is a family homestead. He's lived on this property up until the fire for 70 years. And when it comes down to being able to live out his life with dignity, I think this is a great option for him. And when you look at it from the pictures, it looks like a nice little ranch bungalow, and certainly can fit in with the neighborhood. So those are my comments, Mr. Mayor, and I look forward to this report coming back in a positive. I'm not sure when that would be. Maybe Mr. Aquilina.
Through Mr. Mayor, I normally indicate that at the end of the meeting, but
Okay,
what we
that's
do
fine.
is we provide a recommendation report to council at the earliest convenience
Okay.
for council's consideration. I can't see that taking too long.
Okay.
I'm certain that Mr. Snyder is going to address all the comments with all the other appropriate agencies, and I can't see that slowing down anything.
Thank you.
Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to concur with Councillor Butters. I think this is a great solution for this individual. His home was way off, back off the property, off the roadway. In earlier pictures that we looked at, we saw in the summers off that whole area full of trees that you wouldn't even know there was a house back there. And I very much am in favor of this going through for the gentleman, and I hope when the report comes forward, the council feels the same. Thank you.
Any further questions of council? Councillor May.
Through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Aquilino. If this is accepted, this park model trailer will have to be put on a foundation that's suitable for the weight of the trailer, or can it stay on the wheels?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Main, it does require a foundation permit. Part of the building permit process, it has to be properly anchored on a foundation, or for the supporting structure, if blocks are going to be used, the foundation to support those blocks need to be properly engineered and designed to accommodate that. But definitely the building permit would address the proper foundation, anchoring as well.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Aquilina.
Yeah.
At this time, we'd like to ask Mr. Schneider if he has any comments. Mr. McFarland, are you going to speak on Mr. Schneider's behalf?
Yes, Mayor. Yes, I'll.
Come forward to the podium there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Duncan McFarland. I'm Lawrence's lawyer. I have very little to comment about the reports, which are generally in support of this application, as councilors have pointed out. Mr. Schneider has lived his entire life on this property. It was his father's property, maybe even his grandfather's property. The dwelling before it burned was there for approximately 125 years. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Main, it's a perfectly reasonable question whether the home should be on a foundation or on its wheels. There are no wheels on this thing. This home, this so-called mobile home, was in situ in St. David's at the mobile home park for many, many years. It had to be transported to Port Colborne on a low bed float. It has no wheels. It has had no wheels for a very long time. It is, in fact, a modular home, but it was built to the mobile home standard back in the day. And it is, I think, for that reason that staff have considered it a mobile home. But it is immovable. It doesn't have any towing apparatus. It doesn't have any wheels. It doesn't have anything that would constitute mobility. In any event, it's on blocks now. It does have to be properly anchored. There is a system for that, and Mr. Schneider is ready for that. Mr. Schneider has made the appropriate inquiries and costed out the septic system. All of the setbacks that are mandated in the various reports are made with room to spare. As Councillor Butters and Councillor Kenny pointed out, the setback from Forks Road is such that it will fit in very inconspicuously with the surrounding environment, and will represent a comfortable place for Mr. Schneider to hopefully live out his life as long as he's able to live independently. And I would ask for council's support of this application. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner. I don't think this sets any kind of precedent. There is a precedent which I expounded upon to members of the planning staff right back at the beginning. If you look at picture number 12, that is a similar type of modular home. I think it's on Miller Road. I don't know how it got there, but it looks so very similar to what Mr. Schneider is proposing that it's quite striking. It set no kind of precedent for staff at that time, and we're here today, and Mr. Schneider has complied with all of the requests of staff and is, of course, willing to continue to do that if the rezoning is approved, which I ask that it be. Thank you. Are there any questions for me?
Yes, any questions of council or staff to Mr. McFarlane? There being none, thank you, Mr. McFarlane.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Mayor.
it. Are there any questions from anyone in the body of the council chamber this evening? There being none, Mr. Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You saved me from reading a 2-paragraph statement regarding public notice and participation in order to be considered as part of the Ontario Municipal Board appeal, if there is an appeal. Seeing that there's no one from the gallery that wants to speak, I will omit that under my legislative responsibilities. Mr. Mayor, I will conclude that the announcement respecting written notice of passage, if anyone from the public does want to be notified of council's decision on this application, there is a sign-in sheet at the back of the room I left. Please provide your name, your address as well, and we will give you a copy of that. If you wish to be notified of the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment, you must make a written request to the clerk. Only those persons or public bodies that give the clerk a written request for the notice of the passage of the bylaw will be given such notice. Mr. Mayor, this does conclude my public meeting under the Planning Act, and I will have the recommendation report for Council's consideration at the very earliest opportunity. I'm assuming it's going to be the next council meeting, depending on the timing of it all, or the meeting thereafter.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. At this time, I entertain a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Butters, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. All those in favor? Carried. Meeting is adjourned. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole, number 0116, Monday, January 25th. Call that meeting to order. Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
Motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Bodnar, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? There be none, and so be so noted. Move on to the adoption of minutes now. Regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole, 2715, held on December 14th, 2015. Entertain a motion to adopt those minutes. Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Carried. Move on to determination of items requiring separate discussion. Start on my right then. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 1 and item 8.
What, item 1 and item 8? Thank you. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Items 10, 17, and 21.
And 17 and 21.
Yes. Okay.
Anyone else on my right? There being none, move to my left. Any items for discussion, gentlemen? There be none. Call for a motion to approve those items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Butters, seconded by Councillor Main. All those in favor? Carried. Any presentations this evening, Madam Clerk? There are no presentations? Delegations? We have 2 delegations this evening. One is Mr. Greg White. Is Mr. White here? Could you come forward to the podium, Mr. White? Mr. White is the fundraising chair of the Welland Canal Fallen Workers Memorial Task Force, and they're seeking community support for the Welland Canal Fallen Workers Memorial. Just advise those presenters that you have roughly 10 minutes to make your presentation. Mr. White, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Maloney, City Councilors, City staff, and interested attendees. On behalf of the Welland Canal Fallen Workers Task Force, I would like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to talk this evening about the Fallen Workers Memorial. Excuse me, I just got to get this caught up. In 2013, a task force was set up with Rick Dykstra, the then St. Catharines MP, and Brian McMullen, the then Mayor of St. Catharines, leading the group as co-chairs. The mandate of this volunteer organization, now chaired by Mayor of St. Catharines Walter Senzik, is to design, finance, and construct a suitable memorial on the appropriate site to recognize and honor the 137 fallen workers. This task force now includes representation from all 4 Welland Canal communities, all levels of government, local historians, and the labor community, and the marine industry, with administration and project support being provided by the City of St. Catharines. This seems to be moving on its own. I'll keep going. But, the fourth Welland Canal was constructed between 1913.
I think we just moved back again. Can you fix that, Don?
Okay. Thank you. The fourth Welland Canal was constructed between 1913 and 1932. Construction of the canal took its toll. 137 men lost their lives as a result of the construction accidents during this period. These fallen workers came from 8 different provinces and 12 different countries. Many were new to Canada, and they had come seeking a new life for themselves and their families. During construction, 115 names of men who died were inscribed in a Book of the Fallen that was maintained by the construction office. Since then, researchers have confirmed an additional 22 fallen workers, bringing the total to 137. The task force researchers are also in the process of writing an article on each fallen worker. Each Saturday, one of these articles is being published in the St. Catharines Standard. The plan is to publish all 137 stories and then hopefully collate them all together in a book. For example, last Saturday, profile number 20 was published in the Standard. The fallen worker profiled was Joseph Foster, age 42, from North Dorchester, Ontario. Joseph fell 40 feet to a tragic death from a trestle on March 21st, 1916, at the Port Weller Breakwater. Joseph left behind his wife and 5 children. At the opening of the Welland Canal on August 6, 1932, the Minister of Railways and Canals acknowledged the fallen workers. I would like to read an excerpt from Dr. Mannion's remarks that day. It is only right and proper that we should give a thought to the men who lost their lives during the progress of the work. In due course, we shall see that the names of these workmen are suitably preserved and made an enduring portion of the great structure that rises not only as a monument to their effort and their lives, but to the thousands of working men whose unremitting toil, often in the face of difficulty and discouragement, made possible the triumph of the present hour. Here we are, 84 years later, working to ensure Dr. Mannion's promise becomes a reality. The beginning of this initiative started with a group of local historians coming upon the Book of the Fallen and Dr. Mannion's remarks, and then making it their mission to see that these fallen workers were finally given their appropriate and promised recognition. The task force has been able to secure a site on undeveloped land just north of Lock 3 on the Welland Canal. Thank you to the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation for making this site available to the task force at no cost. The task force has also engaged Derek Revington, a renowned Toronto designer, to work on the memorial. Derek has completed a preliminary design for the memorial, which was presented at the official unveiling on this site last August. The design consists of a blackened veil that will greet visitors from the south. Beyond this veil, the site dips into a lock bed, and from this side, the polished steel veil will reflect the surroundings and entice visitors into the site to explore, learn, and remember. Finally, at the north end, sitting in the lock bed, will be the Gates of Remembrance. The name, age at death, and birthplace of each fallen worker will be engraved on these gates, echoing the lock gates of the Welland Canal and the Book of the Fallen. As I mentioned, this memorial will be located at Lock 3 and is on the Greater Niagara Circle route and will be accessible and visible from all directions. Visitors on foot, bike, ship, or car will be able to remember the men who built this engineering marvel, the Welland Canal. Our overall fundraising goal is $750,000, which we expect will cover the cost of the design, construction, and installation of the memorial and completion of the surrounding parquet. We have divided our fundraising initiatives into 4 distinct streams. The government stream has provided, thanks to Rick Dykstra's efforts, a $150,000 contribution from Heritage Canada. Our focus in this area will now be provincial through a possible Trillium grant and the Niagara region. We have received very strong support from the labor stream. Unifor, the union representing the Seaway workers, the SIU representing workers on Great Lakes vessels, and the Niagara Regional Labor Council have all committed financial support. The response from the corporate stream has been very encouraging, as we have received commitments from 10 companies at the $25,000 platinum level. These 10 include local companies Algoma Central Corporation and Rankin Construction, as well as the Ontario Paper Thorold Foundation. Our community stream entails approaching local service clubs and foundations, and we will commence a grassroots community campaign once the corporate campaign nears completion. In total, from all 4 streams, we have now reached 70% of our fundraising target. On Monday, February 8th, the task force will be holding 2 open houses in Niagara. This will be an opportunity for anyone interested to get a closer look at the plans for the Welland Canal Fallen Workers Memorial and hear from the designer, Derek Revington. The South Niagara Open House will be held here in these council chambers from 3 to 4:30, while the North Niagara event will be held at the St. Catharines Museum and Welland Canal Centre from 6:30 to 8 p.m. This ends my prepared remarks, but I would be pleased to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Mr. White, for your presentation. Are there members of council who would like to ask a question this evening? Councillor Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. White. You're obviously approaching all councils in the Niagara region for support of this?
Yes.
And
well, the main ones we're dealing with are the 4 councils adjacent to the Welland Canal: St. Catharines, Thorold, Welland, and Port Colborne. Okay. And they're all involved in the task force.
There's members from all those.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? It's my understanding that in other locations, the main monument is going to be at Lock 3.
Just north of Lock,
yeah.
of the viewing center, yes?
Yeah, just off the road there. I understand there may be some displays at other communities along the canal?
That is, it's not in the main design, but that is the plan, is to have interpretive panels at each of the communities that will explain the memorial and lead them to the site. And would we have the privilege of reviewing any that may come to Port Colborne, the text and the story that they tell? I don't see why not, yes.
Thank you. No other questions? Thank you for your presentation. That was very interesting, and I certainly look forward to seeing it come to fruition.
Oh, it'll come to fruition. We're going very well with the fundraising.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. At this time, I'd like Catherine Cluck to come forward from the Lioness.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Maloney, councillors, city staff, and fellow guests. My name is Catherine Clouk, and I'm here on behalf of the Port Colborne Lioness Club. So thank you once again for accepting our request to share some information about the Port Colborne Lioness Club and our involvement in the community. So our 2015-2016 year, it's been off to a great start. In addition to supporting local needs, which we do on a regular basis, one of our priorities for this year is to purchase 2 guide dogs for individuals with hearing and vision impairment. So over the past several years, we've managed to save about $10,000 to put towards this initiative, and we've requested to the Guide Dogs of Canada that the dogs are paired with individuals from Port Colborne or a neighbouring community. So as for our fundraising events, our Breakfast with Santa, we sold out again this year, and so we served up pancakes to over 250 guests and volunteers. And we also introduced a new fundraising event, which is Progressive Euchre. And so we ran our first Euchre party in November, and our second one is part of Sports Fest this year. So that's going to be on Friday, February 19th. So we also have our spring annual craft show and luncheon, and backed by popular demand, and that's why I have Victoria here with me, is we're launching our Valentine's Candygram. So it was very successful last year. I brought Victoria along this evening so that she could share some of her samples with you, and she can talk to you a little bit about the chocolates that she makes as well. Okay. She's going to feed you. So she's got 2 samples here with her. And the first one that she has, it's a Turkish espresso bark, and it's layers of dark and white chocolate. And it's sprinkled with fine ground Turkish espresso powder and crunchy cocoa nibs. And the other one that she has is salted almond bark, which is a delicious milk chocolate sprinkled with fresh roasted almonds, and it's topped with sea salt. So we've expanded our offerings for this year. We did just 1 package last year. This year we have a range where we've got these mini bags that have candies and chocolates for kids. And then we also have the heart-shaped boxes, which have the little handmade, and they're handmade, hand-painted, all done on a marble slab. So we really want to make this something that's special and unique, and that's the reason that we've chosen to go ahead with the fundraising event this year again. And we also deliver too. Like, that's one of the things that we thought was really special last year and powerful, is knocking on the door and everyone's happy expression when they actually saw that they were getting a gift. So I want to thank you, and Claudia Brema is also here, and so she wanted to share something as well.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting her, but anyway, because we strike a budget every year, the Lioness, and we critique it. We've tried to keep our funds here local. One of our recipients is Meals on Wheels. I've just come from a board meeting from Meals on Wheels, and their big fundraiser, because they have to always do a fundraiser on their own. The fundraiser this year is a dinner, April 9th, at the Croatian National Home on Broadway Avenue in Welland. The dinner is always a very good one, of cabbage rolls and chicken, but I think the drawing card is the mind reader, illusionist. He's just fantastic. His show is mind-boggling, Nick Wallace, and he will be with us again this year. So I found out on the QT that the mayor and his wife will be attending, and I'm sure he would like to have company at his table. So tickets are available, and again, the Lioness are endorsing this venture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Brema and Catherine.
Thank you.
And, I'm sorry, what was
Yes,
your name?
Victoria.
Victoria.
Yes.
Sorry, Victoria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a bit of information about the fundraiser. We'll be launching it on Facebook. My contact information is here, but you can contact any of the Lioness members as well. So this is our big kickoff, and it will run until about, well, right before Valentine's Day. So I'll just pass that around. And if you have any questions, are there any questions about the Lioness Club or
Any members of council have a question on the fundraiser or Lioness? I think we all know Lioness and the good work they do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Moving along on the agenda, the next item is the mayor's report. Certainly, we had a very successful New Year's Eve at the Valley Center during most of the afternoon and into the evening with the culmination of the fireworks. For those who attended, young families, they had a good time. It was very much appreciated. Councillor Butters was the lady who painted clown faces again, and she's always a hit in a very popular location. Councillor Demeray was there as well. And anyway, I'd like to congratulate the special events team for a job well done. It was a good way to bring in the new year and a good family way to bring in the new year. A few days later, we had the mayor's levee. We had the Russian girls under 18 hockey team join us for the levee. They presented me with a banner, which we'll keep in our library. But the girls were part of the under 18 World Junior teams that play in St. Catharines. They did very well. The United States came out on top, but they were, just young ladies with smiles and beaming faces and good, wholesome kids. And we're very pleased that they chose the Valley Center to host their practices throughout, leading up to the tournament. And we wish them well and hope they will perhaps come back again. And just a further comment and congratulations to the NHS. They received their accreditation again with commendation. And so they were, I think that's the highest level of approval by the province. So we congratulate them on that achievement. Regional Councillor Barrick is not with us this evening, so we don't have a report, but there's nothing on the agenda that was compelling. Councillors' items. Do we have any councillors who have issues that they'd like to bring up this evening? Councillor Bodner, then Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Council and Mr. Agolina. I now have a marijuana file, which is something I never thought I would have, but I do have one in my drawer from some things we've been dealing with in Ward 4. But, this looks like it's an issue that's certainly got legs and is going to move ahead. And one of the things I've been reading up on is marijuana dispensaries that are locating in municipalities. The ones I know of, there's 100 of them in the Vancouver, Victoria area and 50 in Toronto. And these are dispensaries where you can take your prescription, if you have one for medical marijuana, and go in and look at, handle, sniff the marijuana, see what strength it is and everything like that. And then you go out with your product. So unlike where now you have to mail your request in to a legal grower, these are popping up in municipalities. And I just wondered whether it might be prudent for us to try to get ahead of the curve just to see whether we need to do anything, or are we, how are other municipalities treating these? I know Vancouver requires a $30,000 license to start one of these up. Toronto said they're not going to do a bylaw because they think that it's going to take care of itself in a matter of months when the federal government brings down some kind of ruling or something. But we've kind of got caught in a few situations before. I'll bring up one from a while ago when the snakes came into town and we didn't have a bylaw. I guess I'm just asking staff and council if they would approve asking staff, do we need to be on top of this? Is it a concern? Look, they're perfectly, well, kind of legal, and what's staff's opinion? Is there any sense to, do we want to put a business licensing fee on them? Do we want to see what other municipalities are doing? Just to be proactive, and it may happen that one will never start up, but if it does, we should know something about it, I think, at least. So, and have the option to, say we want to regulate them or we don't want to regulate them, where are they going to go, all that kind of stuff. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd ask if we could have staff look into, whether we need to do anything with this.
Do we have any comments of council on Mr. Bodner's intervention? Councillor Butters.
Obviously, I'm going to support that hugely. Being on the receiving end of many phone calls and emails from concerned people in Ward 4 when it sort of all started happening out there. So anything that we can do that protects our citizens and to be proactive in dealing with what I think is probably coming up the pike sooner or later, we might as well. We might as well know where else we need to be at and be ready for it. Thank you.
Any other comments of members of council? Councillor Bodner, you and Councillor Butters hosted an information meeting out in your ward. How did that go? Are there any comments on it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we did. We had approximately 200 people at Cherokee Community Center. Full house with lots of questions. I think it went fairly well. We had answers prepared ahead of time to questions we knew of. The three people that are going to be owners of this business that's proposed, or they're moving ahead with that Magnum Crane, were there to answer questions. I thought they did a professional job. They had answers to 99% of the questions, and Councillor Butters and I, we actually ran out of, it was more people than we thought might be there, so we ran out of handouts. People gave us their email addresses. Staff answered the questions we couldn't answer, and those questions had been sent out to the people that couldn't get copies. I think that a lot of people, well, we did have a lot of phone calls saying that they went away with the information they wanted, so now it's just a matter of, answering any more questions that come forward. So I think it was a good approach to take. Everybody was in the room at the same time, heard the same questions, heard the answers, so there wasn't different interpretations as it went along. So from the aspect of getting information out, I think it was a worthwhile endeavor.
Well, thank you both for hosting that meeting. Councillor Main and I were both there, but we were at the door. We couldn't get in. The start time, the place was packed, and I thought it was a productive meeting, quite frankly. Would it be better to entertain a notice of motion in the proper? Yeah. We'll get it on the agenda. Yeah. But there's a notice of motion on our agenda. Can we not do it there? I'll give you a few minutes to draft a notice of motion so that we can put it before council and asking for staff to give us direction on this matter. Okay?
I'm going to ask the clerk for her expertise in this, but, so we'll give her a heads up too. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Elliott, you had your hand up too, then Councillor Danch. Cool. Yeah, he's finished.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First order of business I had was to ask council to approve spending in excess of our allowance for conference attendance. The AMO conference this year is in August. The dates escape me. I believe it's about the 13th. And the allowance that we get will cover the hotel cost and the registration for the conference. So I'm asking for council approval to spend beyond what we were budgeted for. And just as an aside to asking for that, at this year's conference, the study tour that I would like to sign up for is actually a trip to Leamington, and it partners well with what Ron was just talking about. The study tour is a tour of a medical marijuana production facility in Leamington. So it'll be interesting to see what their residents had to say and how they managed to get their production facility up. So I'm hoping for permission to spend beyond my means, so I'll put that out to council.
Thank you. Councillor Bunner, you had a question?
Mr. Mayor, I think it's been proven that we've got lots of value out of conferences that councilors have attended in the past, and I certainly would be happy to make the motion that Councillor Elliott gets the money he needs to attend this, and looking forward to any ideas he might pick up while he's there.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Butters? Perhaps we can deal with this right at this time, Madam Clerk. Is there any discussion on the motion? There being none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Anything further?
Yeah, just one other issue. And thank you, Mayor, through you too, and thank you to council. And it's just as a point of order or a comment on what Ron's talking about. The last time I did attend AMO was in Ottawa, and the consultant that we have working on our Operations Center, Prison Partners, I actually made contact with and let them know that the Operations Center was coming up for bids. Whether or not that was the straw that broke the back that got them to come in. But if I'm not mistaken, their bid was, I think, around $10,000 or $15,000 cheaper than the next quote from consultants. If whatever it was, I know that it was considerably less than what the next one. So it is worthwhile to go to meet, have contacts, and get people interested in what's going on in town. So I just wanted to confirm that what Ron had said. On the second issue that I had real quick, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ron, it's a great investment that Shoppers Drug Mart made in our city, and the new store is fabulous. It has drawn a lot of attention and a lot of business to that corner. The one thing I have noticed is the pedestrian traffic has increased significantly at the corner, and I'm wondering if there's any way that we could put, if we could paint a crosswalk or anything on Clarence Street, or do anything to make a discernible crossing on Clarence, because right now I think it's just on Catherine that we have the crosswalks. And I say that because there seems to be a lot of people walking out from between parked cars going across the street towards Food Basics and whatnot, and it just seems to be random on where people are walking across the street. I'd really like to be a little proactive and see if there's anything we can do that maybe would streamline where people are looking to cross and using a certain area to get drivers accustomed to looking out for people. I also noticed that an issue that we might be having again is the planter box in front of the Legion. When people are heading south on Catherine, they're still pulling out extremely far with the increased traffic parking there to see cars coming both ways, which again leads to an issue with people trying to cross the street, and I got people in the crosswalk and cars blocking them off. So maybe we can have a look at that. I know we're doing the traffic study coming up, but I just was going to ask if you think that there's any short-term remedy or anything we can do to kind of make it a little bit safer.
Dr. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We can certainly take a look at all those issues. I think the suggestion to have a look at that intersection with the traffic operations study would be a good move. We wouldn't recommend initially that we put an uncontrolled pedestrian crossing. They're unsafe, as everyone knows. So let's take a look at that. And one of the focuses on the traffic study will be the safety at our intersection, especially in the urban area. So we'll put that as a highlight on the study.
That's certainly a bad intersection at the best of times. Certainly with, has been indicated, the density of pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic as well has made that intersection an area of concern, and we welcome that traffic operations study and your input on that committee, Mr. Elliott. Anyone else? Councilor Dance, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Ron if you could give us maybe an update on the Main Street Bridge, which has been up for about 4 months now, and if there's any idea when we might see some traffic going over that.
Through Mr. Mayor to Council, what I can do is share some minutes from a conference call we had on January the 14th between the mayor, the CAO, myself, and senior members of the St. Lawrence Seaway. We had asked for an update on the status of several of the projects that were underway. Number one being the Weir 8 Bridge structure. I'll give you an update on that. The St. Lawrence Seaway has reviewed the grades on the deck and have decided to mill the asphalt down in the transition area between the bridge deck and the railway tracks. The rehabilitated deck is several inches higher than previous elevations prior to their work. The work will be completed when the asphalt plants open in the spring. Suggestion from the Seaway at the railway tracks had settled, causing an increase in the elevation change at the tracks. We were able to review our as-built drawings from 2011 and do a quick survey of those tracks, and in fact we can confirm and have confirmed with the Seaway that there's been no settlement in the tracks between 2011 and the present time when we did the survey. It's strictly the raising of the bridge that was rehabilitated by the Seaway late last year. Bridge 19 status, structural repairs for the bridge were tendered last week. The work is scheduled to begin the first week of February with a 6-week construction period, completion by March 21st. They're expecting the repair will bring the bridge capacity back up to the full 60-ton design capacity that it was at initially. It had been reduced to 50 tons. So the good news is all the structural members on the bridge that have to be replaced are readily in stock. There's no special fabrication, so they're very confident they can have this work done in the 6-week period and around the opening of the Seaway itself. Bridge 21 repairs, as they always do during the winter, there's on Bridge 21 downtown, they'll have 5 days of intermittent closures prior to the reopening of the Seaway, and they're going to confirm those dates with us so we can make the public aware of what those dates are. And one additional item that they raised with us, fencing at Wharf 12. As part of the security system for the Seaway, fencing is going to be installed along the east side of the canal, along Wharf 12 and the west side of Barber Drive. It's a 7-foot fence with barbed wire. It'll be gated to allow access for maintenance and emergency vehicles. So that'll be underway this year. So that's the update on the conference call we had with them.
Any additional questions? Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to Councillor Danch's questions, Councillor Doucette actually asked me to raise this issue, and I was going to anyway. I think we're all getting a lot of emails from the public asking about the status of the bridge, and I'm glad to hear what's happening with the Main Street Bridge and over the canal. But back to the Weir Bridge, you did say that it would be they would mill that section of the rise, and that it would be done in the spring, but you didn't say how long that action would take.
Through Mr. Mayor, that'll be a fairly quick, I wouldn't suspect more than a day or two. The milling machine will come in, reduce that transition between the existing deck and the railway tracks, and then the asphalt plants have to be open so they can just finish off that milled area with a smooth surface. So it shouldn't be more than a couple days.
Great, thank you so much.
Any other questions of members of council? Councillor May.
Through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Keene. I had some complaints last week about the smoking at the Vale Center. A father phoned me and complained about having to run the gauntlet by taking his kid in to do swimming at the Y. He said there's lots of people smoking cigarette butts everywhere. And I don't really go to the Vale Center, and I decided I would go. And the first thing I did was took a picture of the no smoking sign underneath the entranceway. It said, no smoking allowed on this property, which means the whole property. And it gave the regional bylaw, which I read, and the bylaw was written to protect children and vulnerable persons from the exposure to outdoor secondhand smoke. There's 4 pages here, and it finds and what's all encompasses in the fines and who can deliver them and the whole 9 yards. Have we had, to your knowledge, any enforcement from the Niagara region regarding that situation?
Mr. Hakeem, do you want to? talk about that?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Main. No, we haven't, but we've had numerous meetings and dialogue with the tobacco control officers and the regional health department to let them know that we've had complaints, and we've been advised it's complaint-based in terms of their enforcement. So I have not been advised that any tobacco control officers have been out. I've actually consulted with some of the staff there, including community services staff and the facility staff, and they're as vigilant as they can be, making sure the area's, kept clean within reason and certainly out there on a recurring basis. But nothing has been brought to our attention from the tobacco control unit, other than the fact that we've complained to them. And I've personally made the phone calls to the hotline to ensure that they're aware we've had some of these complaints, especially when they come directly to our attention.
Through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Hakeem. Having said that, to me the signs are redundant if people are going to continue to do it. Is there anything at all that we can do as a city who actually owns the Vail Center to enforce that? Or is that strictly a regional requirement?
Through your worship to Councillor Main, the tobacco control unit, through their enforcement officials there, are the ones that basically carry out any enforcement. I don't know what coordination they've had with our own bylaw enforcement, but I believe it's the tobacco control unit. Maybe my colleague Dan might be able to answer that in terms of our bylaw. But I know that they're the ones that carry the burden of ensuring enforcement is carried out, and I believe that enforcement is supposed to take place starting this year. There was an education phase, which we were fully compliant with, and we have information throughout our facility, throughout the video monitors. We updated in Leisure Guide, so the educational component is well versed. We've had them actually attend our events as well. We post all the event dates to make sure that they're aware, and they have been on site with educational material. And I think the tobacco control officers, if I can call them that, have been on site at Canal Days and as far as providing information to the public.
Just one more question, Mr. Hakeem. Now, this bylaw was passed by a majority of the members of Regional Council on the 10th day of October of 2013. And we're going into 2016 now. And I really do think there's something has to be done when you have, you're supposed to set an example for kids. You've got parents taking kids in there to do the health and wellness thing, the exercise, the swimming in the pool and all that. And they have to run that gauntlet every time they go. It's just a thorn in my side, and maybe we can get something done at the regional level. Thanks.
Mr. Hakeem.
Through your worship to Councillor Mead, I'll reach out to the tobacco control unit again. They are certainly receiving complaints from various jurisdictions along this line, and I don't think we're the only facility encountering this problem. And I'll reach out to them to try and put the bug in the ear that we need some attention, particularly at the Valley Center. It is a popular facility, especially weeknights, weekends, where a lot of tournaments out of town personnel come. And as far as the bylaw enforcement, I think enforcement has to be in place in order for it to be effective. So hopefully they'll take heed of that notice. I'll make sure that they are notified first thing tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Hakeem. I had a similar complaint last week. It was a grandfather taking his grandson to hockey. And I spoke with the tobacco restraint officer, who has, the region has the jurisdiction to, in fact, enforce the bylaw. There was a question of inconsistency with signage and the fact that the entire complex is under the control of the prohibition, so that perhaps we can work out the inconsistency and, if necessary, have new signs that are accurate, and then move forward with prosecutions. Councillor Hanson, did you have a comment? Director?
Through your worship, I believe the signs, we've ordered the signs from the region, and they've been supplied to the facility staff who've been putting them up consistently throughout. Originally, we had a sign there that was even more restrictive than the regional bylaw to begin with when we opened the facility. We're insisting that people, if they want to smoke, have to smoke on the 100 feet away. But regardless, the new bylaw, particularly with the new provincial act as well, restricts smoking in public areas, particularly parks. So that whole facility is protected, but the regional bylaw still allows people to smoke, I believe, in the parking lot, as well as sidewalks and on roadways. But it still has to be enforced as far as the envelope of the building, particularly in this case. So we'll make sure that they're aware of that. We'll double check the signage to make sure, but I believe all the signs that we've supplied, because I know my office ordered them, were supplied to the facility staff. So they're consistently being put up in different locations throughout all the public areas.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Mr. Hakeem. I'm sure Mr. Main will keep an eye on the situation. Councillor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hakeem, Harry, would it help if the city of Port Colborne were to make a formal request to the region to have their bylaw officers or their smoking police come down to the Valley Centre at a couple of predetermined peak times and be there to issue fines to the smokers, not just to, I think the education period is well past, so it's past the time to educate them. The signs are there. They are in compliance to my understanding as well. And we have the municipal bylaw as well that says no smoking on any municipal property. So you put it all together, I think it's time to act on it rather than talk about it, because I've made several calls too and I have not seen them there. So it's time to do something more.
Through your worship to Councillor Demeray, any information that gets back to the Tobacco Control Unit hotline, I think, is value, because they do track those calls. Again, that's what we're advised. And it's a complaint base, so I think the more they get, the more they're apt to act, hopefully. But I'll certainly contact them tomorrow to get maybe a log even to see how many complaints were actually lodged for the Valley Centre in particular. But any complaints that come forward from any member of council or the public is valued at this point in time.
Okay, well, I was thinking of something far more stronger than a phone call. I'm thinking of a formal request, because this has been going on for quite some time and there's no true action. So maybe it's time. There's not much point in supporting regional efforts if they're not going to come through and do their end.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Main. I would like it to remain smoke-free property, the whole property. I have grandkids that play soccer in the summer, and I certainly don't want people smoking where they're playing soccer either, just like people don't want to walk through a hail of smoke to go into the center. But, Harry, do we not have cameras outside the doorway at the Vale Centre? On the outside to see exactly who's there taking a puff?
We do, through you to Councillor Kenny. We do have cameras, but they're not monitored like someone sitting there monitoring the camera. They're there for follow-up, perhaps on an incident or a matter concerning safety or security. So there's follow-up then. We have an opportunity to view the camera footage then. But as far as monitoring, no. But again, the property is designated, particularly parks are designated smoke-free. It's the enforcement link that's kind of missing in this regard. And again, I don't think we're immune to that problem, but doesn't mean that we can't step up the rhetoric to ensure that enforcement is at least started somewhere, because all it takes perhaps is one ticket or one opportunity where you really hit someone in the pocketbook, perhaps. So we'll follow up with them diligently and make sure that they understand. And I have spoken to staff about this. If they do get complaints or they see things, make the effort to make the complaint right away with a specific date and time, so that, again, it's all logged by them, and it just helps us hopefully build our case.
Just one more comment, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps we should have a sign above that. This is a smoke-free property that says, "Smile, you're on camera." And maybe that will enforce it even better. Thank you.
Any other questions of members of council? There being none, thank you very much. At this time, we moved on for consideration of items requiring separate discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Oh, Mr. Senet.
Just three, Mr. Mayor, under staff responses. I have a response for Councillor Elliott from the last council meeting with regard to Niagara Regional Housing, the property tax relief. So I just wanted to provide that information to council in that there are two regional housing properties in Port Colborne, and if the region was to find the legislation to provide tax relief to those particular properties. The two properties in question in Port Colborne raises about $65,000 in municipal property taxes here in Port Colborne. So that's just under 0.5% levy. So if, for example, that they did become exempt for whatever reason through the region, that would be a direct cost to Port Colborne, in which we'd have to raise a minimum $65,000. The cost for the properties here in Port Colborne to the region is about $60,000, and education taxes would be about close to $9,000. So those two properties basically are taxed about $134,000. So there is an effect if it does happen that it does affect Port Colborne. Other municipalities probably more so than what we have, since we just have the two facilities here in Port Colborne. But there is definitely a small effect here to Port Colborne.
Any further comments or questions on that issue? Thank you, Mr. Senes, for volunteering that information. I would also, while we're talking about taxes and budget, like to point out the upcoming budget committee meetings, Tuesday, January 26, 2016 at 5 p.m. here in the council chambers. Monday, February 1st, 2016, again, a special committee budget meeting, 5 p.m. And Wednesday, February 3rd, 2016, special committee of the whole, 5 p.m. Again, a budget meeting. If members of the public are interested, we are welcome to come down to listen to these deliberations. Fine, Mr. Senes. Anything further on that point? Okay, thank you. If there being no further comments, move on to items requiring consideration. Item number 1 was Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Development Report number 2016-13, subject recommendation report for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, file D 1413-14, 485 Northland Avenue.
Before we go further with that, I have a letter here from, I believe it's Mr. Lalouette, who wanted to make sure that council had received this so it can be copied of a record if in fact there was an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board. So I will leave this with our clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I received that from Mr. Lalouette the other day, and he was just responding to questions he asked planning staff. Planning staff gave him answers, and this was a secondary comment. At our very first meeting that we had in regards to this, his comments were not included, and it's since been rectified, so he's happy about that. But it was very important. Mrs. Lalouette is here tonight, if council will allow her to speak. She would like to speak on that same issue, which I hope that council will allow that to happen. There are so many questions, Your Worship and council members, that I still have on this property. I really don't hardly know where to begin. I can tell you that I personally, along with other council members, have visited the property. I've done that a couple of times and checked it out, and I guess there's just, I went and got, a friend of mine gave me information that they got from the province regarding the Retirement Homes Act, and the regulations that in regards to retirement homes. And just this one, I just want to, retirement home means a residential complex or part of a residential complex that is occupied primarily by persons who are 65 years of age or older. Now, in this proposal, members of council, the intent was to include, if it's page 61, it says the intent of the application is to amend the existing bylaw, which allows for a senior citizens apartment house in the application for its continued use, and to permit additional uses, including a residential retirement home, apartment dwellings, live with and without supportive care, and street townhouse dwellings. The block townhouse dwellings that are mentioned on page 61 of the report have since been removed by the applicant. I was very happy that that happened. But, and it says on page 62 that subsequent to several discussions between planning staff and the applicant, that it was decided to remove those block townhouses. There are still several things where I have questions, and I'm hoping maybe planning staff or engineering staff can help me out. And it says that on page 64, about the proposed intensification and redevelopment plan is consistent with the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe policies, whereby existing municipal sewer and sanitary sewers have been utilized. And then with respect to the proposed street townhouses units, this development is consistent with the policies, but consistent with the policies or not, where the proposed townhouses are concerned for the residents in that area. I don't know what to say. I'm only allowed 10 minutes too, so I just don't know where to go with this. I understand that the residents in there are in those dwellings because simply, Your Worship, they can't afford anything else. And it's sad, but when you look at what's being proposed there, I think I have a moral obligation to them. In here, it says the applicant for a license, which I still don't know if the applicant has, an application for a license shall provide the registrar with documents and information required under Section 34 of the Act in the form and manner that the registrar specifies. The number of residents that the retired home can accommodate. It goes on to say that that the applicant has obtained extra expense insurance with respect to the home or will obtain it, an authorized insurer to make sure that that's all taken. Those are all things, Your Worship, that I don't know about, and because I don't know about it, because these are regulations that the province has in place, morally I cannot support this. There's just too many unanswered questions for me. I wish I had a clearer view of what was going on there, but I don't. And for now, Your Worship, that's my comments. I just hope council considers everything. If you haven't been to that home, if you haven't taken a look, please, you should have done that. It's you know, you really got to say there's still. There was several of us that went. Councillor Danch was one of them at the time, and he went and asked about 2 large boats that are in the parking lot, and asked why were they there. He was assured that day, and that was months ago when we went, they would be removed. They're still there. So too many inconsistencies, not enough proper answers. Until I hear something that can change my mind, I will not be supporting this application. But I would ask, Your Worship and members of council, that Mrs. Lalowette, who's here, is allowed to make her presentation if that's possible. Thank you.
Okay, we will deal with the request for Mr. Lalowette to speak after we members of council.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Aquilina, do you have any comments on Councillor Kenny's comments?
Through Mr. Mayor, it may be easier for me to answer individual questions. I know Councillor Kenny had a lot to say there, so I don't want to miss out on anything.
I'm sorry, Mr. Aquilina. Could you repeat that again? I was chatting with the...
No problem, Mr. Mayor. I had stated, based on Councillor Kenny's elaborate email,
boy.
I don't want to miss out on anything, so if she wants me to answer individual questions, I'd be more happy to do so.
I do want to ask about, I asked, there was another one there, thank you, because when you said that, can you ask me something else? I asked the question at our very first meeting if there was going to be affordable housing, and Mr. Venerie said no, there was not going to be geared for that. And yet, in this report, it mentions, I'm just going to try to find that now. It mentions that, it is in there, right, Barb? Yeah.
I saw it in there too.
It mentions that it is going to be geared for affordable housing. Also, I just want to know, under the Planning Act, are we or should we be concerned about the Ontario regulations regarding retirement homes? That's number one with me, because I do have concerns there. When it was a residence for seniors under the region, they have guidelines they have to go by. Do those same guidelines apply to a private owner?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, my understanding under the Retirement Homes Act, and I'm no expert in that, I'll admit that, but there is a Retirement Homes Regulatory Authority that oversees all these homes. So if anyone's going to construct or have an actual operation, they are guided by the Retirement Homes Act, and that regulatory authority ensures that anything that goes on in that facility, the operation of it, the construction of it, it's under their authority to ensure that things are done above board.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Okay, thank you. So he's been in non-compliance with his lodging home for quite some time, right? It's under the department gave him an okay to go in with a lodging residence, and he's been in non-compliance. So is that under any regulatory, or can you just throw anything together and no one cares?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, the property was in violation. That's why we have the application before us. That occurred in 2014. The council needs to make a decision if they want to permit lodging. There is no authority for actual care of lodging. The region of Niagara ensures that certain units, the facility is safe from a health perspective. Our fire department ensures that it's safe from a fire emergency perspective. Those are the two regulatory authorities that look over lodging homes in the city.
Okay, then, so in the report it says 20 rooms for lodging, 20 rooms. So it's already in your report that you know that he's going to have 20 rooms for lodging will be contained in one wing of the existing Northland building. So it's okay for him to have those 20, still okay for him to have those 20 lodging rooms?
Through Mr. Mayor, presently right now there are 8 rooms for lodging. Mr. Veneri is requesting 20 rooms with no supportive care for lodging in Area A.
I know, and that's what I'm asking you. So who will be controlling that, Mr. Aquilina? That they get good care, that the facility is safe for them. Like, who's going to be controlling that?
Through Mr. Mayor, if there's a complaint made with respect to the actual health within that facility, whether it's mold, that's something that the region of Niagara oversees. If it's something to do with unsafe conditions in there, our emergency services would go in there and inspect, which they've done. They would oversee that. There's no other authority that actually ensures that individuals are being treated properly, if that's what your inquiry is.
That's what I'm inquiring about. Thank you. I'll let other councillors speak.
Just to clear up a loose end, Councillor Kenny requested, made a motion to request Mrs. Lalouette to be able to speak. We need a seconder for that motion. Is there a seconder? Okay. We also require a motion, a seconder for the motion to recommend the report. Councillor Demery. Okay. We'll deal with Mrs. Lalouette when all the councillors have had an opportunity to comment. Any other comments? Councillor Demery, Councillor Main, Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I would echo all of Councillor Kenny's comments, and I'm in complete agreement with her on that. Having toured the facility myself, and having met with and listened to the manager and the manager's assistant, and knowing that the owner is the one applying for all of this, but yet the manager and his assistant are the people who are going to run the facility and deal with everyone and provide this care. Having met with the former and current residents, neighborhood residents, and having spoken to senior healthcare professionals, I can say that I have little or no confidence that by allowing this project to move forward, we'd be serving the best interests of our community. So I will not be supporting it as it stands today.
Councillor Main.
It's my concern. I was hoping that the chief would be here. I asked him at a previous meeting. He said that the Ontario Fire Code would be in 3 sections of this building because of 3 different uses. And but I didn't get to ask him if the 3 buildings were attached by common doorways, whether you would have to go with the maximum or whether you could go with the minimum in certain areas. I didn't get an answer from him, so I don't feel confident until I do get that answer of voting for this. And the other thing I have to say is basically from visiting it, and we all talk about affordable housing, we all talk about poverty, we all talk about making life better on, and to what standard? Are we supplying a roof and 4 walls and a little bit of heat and electricity? Or are we making something decent that people can be comfortable in and safe in? And I got that from the visits, the 2 visits I was there. I might be totally out in left field, but I was left with that interpretation the 2 times I was there. I didn't see much of a change. So I can't support this.
Thank you. Councillor Butters, did I see your hand up?
Yes, you did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel much the same as Councillor Kenny and Councillor Damaris and Councillor Main, and I did go to the place, and I felt like I wasn't getting straight answers from the individuals that were representing themselves as managing this facility. Some of the time I didn't feel like I was getting straight answers from the proponent himself. Sometimes it was, well, affordable housing, well, no, it won't be. You know, basically wanted kind of a carte blanche to do whatever. And I'm not instilled with any great confidence either that this is a good thing for seniors or community or even the people that are living there right now, other than it is a roof over their heads. I find it interesting that, you know, in part of the provincial policy statement, and this is in the report, you know, the policies that promote building strong communities, and I'm not sure that this falls under that. I'm not convinced that it falls under that. You know, it may satisfy policies of intensifying and, you know, efficiently using land, but we're talking about real people here. We're talking about real people that could be living in a place that I'm not real comfortable with the folks that are living in there right now after having spoken with them, that things are all on the up and up and their needs are really being met. There is a lot of disturbing allegations made by past residents there. I can't ignore that, nor will I. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Comments or questions from gentleman to my left? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Dan. Dan, the way the property sits now under the zoning of it, is it regulated by any authorities other than the fire department, who goes in emergency services, and the region for health concerns. You talked about a boarding house that's being used at, but it's not under the proper zoning. Does anybody still have the authority over it as it sits right today?
Mr. Racker.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott. If I understand your question, right now the zoning bylaw permits a senior citizen's home. Again, that would be under the regulations of the province. In this case, it would be the region if they were still running that facility, but they're not. So under the Retirement Homes Act, it would be the regulatory authority that would ensure if someone is going to actually resurrect that senior citizen's home, they would be the ones that would oversee it. If there's anything to do, again, with a fire concern, whether it's wiring or separation, things of that nature, our fire department is going to want to ensure that it's properly sprinklered, and the region is going to oversee if there's any other health concerns like they've done in this facility in the past.
So if we change the zoning on it, through you, Mr. Mayor, if the zoning gets changed on it to include a retirement home, the care and control of it, or the overseeing body of it, gets promoted to the province and not the region then, because of the change of use.
Through Mr. Mayor, my understanding is yes, if it's for a private facility, it kicks up to the province.
Kicks up to the province. And this is the problem I'm having. I mean, I understand what everybody's saying, that you don't like him as an operator. But that's not what we're here to judge. We've got an issue before us that's an issue of the Planning Act. Does the Planning Act differentiate between operations, who's a good operator, who's a bad operator? Or does the Planning Act just take a look at what the best use of a piece of property is?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's correct. The Planning Act strictly deals with use of land. Does not get into other factors. You have policies that would be the province, the region, or our local official plan that we look at, and it's on a land use perspective. Those are the policies.
So all three policy statements that this application comes under, provincial policy statement, regional policy statement, and our own city's policy with regard to zoning, this all meets those standards and the criterias.
Through Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
And that's the trouble that I'm having. I understand that the concern for the residents that are going to move into it. I fully understand that. But like I said to Councillor Danch, if somebody's here with an application to rezone a piece of property for a restaurant, I can't tell you that you can't have a restaurant there because I think you're a bad cook. I'm not sure what the applicant's track record is as an owner of his property other than what he's got there now. Have we enforced the bylaws? No, because his boat's there. Have we fined him at all for having boat storage in an area that it's not supposed to be?
If I can, Mr. Mayor, the boat is in compliance with our zoning bylaw.
So he can have the boats there?
Correct.
So there's no issue about the boats then? From a zoning bylaw perspective, he can have them there legally?
Yes.
So that's not an issue?
Correct. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
So then we get down to zoning, on what the proposed use is. And the proposed use is supported by 3 different policy statements. And yet we're going to vote against it. From what I'm hearing, the majority of council is going to vote against it because they don't like the way that the man or the proponent operates the business or the proposed business based on historical what's gone on. And that's where I have an issue. Because we are supposed to judge this on planning policy alone. What he does with that, if we pass the rezoning, he's got an application for a senior's home. We're not even sure he's going to get it. So you're going to vote against something that you don't even know that he doesn't even have permission in hand to get. He has to get the rezoning first. But then the regulatory body gets promoted up to the province instead of the region. So he's got further standards that he has to uphold to get that license. They're going to come and inspect it. So that's the issue. I get that we're looking at the people that are going to live there. But if you run a bad business and you mistreat people, and he's got 8 now that are residents in there, you can leave and you won't be in business for a very long time. But I have to look at it, and I know it sounds hard and cold, but you have to look at it from a planning perspective, in that the use that is being presented is compatible with the land and is compatible with policy statements from 3 different regulatory bodies. It meets all of those standards. It's something that really we should look at because it provides affordable housing for people. We always say we want to have that in Port Colborne. We don't have enough affordable housing for people. We talk about Niagara Housing, and their wait list is 1 million years to get residences. And he's putting forth residences. You can say what you want about the way that he operates a business. I get that. That's your personal opinion on you're a bad operator, you're a terrible person because these people live like they do. But you have to separate that sometimes from what this is. This is the same thing that happened out in Eastside, out in Ward 4, with another piece of property that nobody liked, and we voted against it, and we got a $30,000 bill because we went to the OMB. You have to take a look at it from a planning perspective and leave it at that. We may not like it, and I know that the residents probably don't, but sometimes land is there to be used the way the province says it is, the region says it is, and the municipality says. Our policy statement for planning says this is a good use of that land and that building. And we're going to sit here and we're going to say no. I may be the only one up here, but I'm going to support it on policy, because all planning policies tell us that this is a good use of that piece of land. The location, what the use is for, and we have to go on that. I can't foresee what the proponent is going to do down the road and how he's going to operate his business, and I can't look at that. I have to look at the use that is before us today, and that use is supported by everybody, and I have to accept that, and I will support the decision that, the recommendation that staff has put forward.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Elliott's just said everything I was going to say. I can't think of anything else I'd put in from strictly a planning perspective. I don't see any holes in this. I think it's covered very well. The result of whatever business decisions the owner makes or how he runs his business, hopefully there's enough checks and balances in there, or people won't rent from him or be there. But from a planning perspective, and not to put the corporation in danger of a OMB, I got so many letters. OMB hearing. Certainly, I think I would go with the recommendation put forward by staff. Mr. Mayor, if I can, through you to Dan. Dan, if this is defeated and that building's sitting there, what can that building be used for, just as it is with whatever zoning is or isn't there? What options does the owner have if that was to just sit there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I was just looking at the actual section that we talk about what the present zoning of the property is. That gives you the uses of the land. It's site specifically zoned I-24, and if I could find that section of the report, I will tell you that in addition to all the institutional uses that our zoning bylaw permits, and off the top of my head, I am going to tell you, if I can't find it, I am stalling for time, as you could tell. Of course, I can't find it, but off the top of my head, the institutional zoning of the property permits a senior citizen apartment house, site specifically, a private club, a nursery, a school, private school, an auditorium. There are other uses in that institutional zone, a church, if I recall, and an accessory dwelling unit to a permitted use, off the top of my head. So if the individual wanted to actually tomorrow have seniors citizen apartment house, he would be able to do so. That's what the use of that land was last used for, prior to Mr. Veneri doing things in those buildings, in the building that he's doing now.
I'm good with that, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Gavin. Is there any other councillor that wishes to speak on this? Councillor Butters, again.
Please, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to be really clear, I don't know the proponent from a sack of beans to know whether I would like him or whether I don't like him. I don't know that he's good or he's bad. I'm not basing my decision on any of that. I'm basing my decision on inconsistencies, which I experienced personally. I'm also basing it on a little piece here, and this is in the report on page 64, and it says, in accordance with the provincial policy statement, PPS, the policies that promote building strong communities, the proposal is utilizing an existing development in the urban built boundary. The proposal will provide for a mix of residential uses, including affordable housing for low to moderate income households, support care facility for the elderly, as well as a facility that will provide housing to meet the social, health, and well-being requirements of current and future residents. And the problem with this is that I don't think that does meet. I don't think that threshold has been met. And that's what I base it on. And that's right out of the report. It clearly is not just a planning exercise where you push a bunch of numbers around and you dink around with some measurements and slot stuff here, slot stuff there to make it fit. This is about real people. And in that paragraph, it speaks to the social, health, and well-being requirements of current and future residents. So my difficulty is in speaking to past residents, experiencing the inconsistencies out of their own mouths. I didn't make it up. That's why I've come to the decision that I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kenny, yes?
Yeah, I have another comment too. Page 65 of the report, it says the Northland building was inspected on several occasions by the fire prevention officer and chief building official, and both have indicated the building meets the minimum, let's get real here, minimum standard, although would require upgrades to meet the Retirement Homes Act in areas that contain the rooms that accommodate the elderly. Hello? Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Councillor Kenny has made a request, seconded by Councillor Desmarais, that Mrs. Lalouette be allowed to speak. Mrs. Lalouette, go first. Well, we have to vote on that. All those in favor? Opposed? Confusion there. All those in favor?
For being allowed to speak?
Or for being allowed to speak?
Sure.
Okay. Everyone supports that? Mrs. Lalouette, do you wish to come forward, please?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, council members, city staff, and visitors. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Anne-Marie Lalouette. I live at 321 Knoll Street, and Dave asked me to speak on his behalf. He's put a lot more analysis into this proposal than I have to say. He's done a lot of research, read a lot, and so he knows a lot more about this than I do, so bear with me here. I'm going to try to get through the points as straightforward as I can. He said he wanted to apologize for not being able to attend tonight, but he had a commitment that he couldn't change. We'd like to thank Susan Smythe for getting back to Dave with regards to the questions that he had a couple of weeks ago and sent into to the planning department. Some of the points might be repetitive in this, these items that I'm going to put forth right now, but we feel they're repetitive for a reason, because they're important enough to restate, in that we're not getting the answers that we feel we need. So I'll just go along with Dave's outline here and just try to make it as quick as possible. First of all, we're not against someone running a business as long as it's done properly and doesn't affect the neighboring community as well. So Dave's original letter that he presented at the first council meeting was omitted from the comments. They did say that it was overlooked and wasn't included into the report. They added points into the report, but Dave really wants the entire letter to be in the report if it does end up going to the OMB, because he feels that the letter really has a better feel for what the homeowners feel as opposed to just comments being made, like little point form comments being made. One of the things we'd like to know, so there are a lot of unanswered questions here, so I'm sorry if we keep on pressing forward with trying to get more information on this, but we feel it's important. When and how do we get notified if and when the process begins for OMB? And do we get sufficient time to be able to apply to be a participant? We asked that question in the notes a couple weeks ago, and we got pretty much a good full page or page and a half documentation on what goes on at the OMB hearing and who can apply for this, but it doesn't specify as to if we get notice, if the homeowners get notice when this process begins. So we just kind of want to know that.
Mr. Aquilina, can you respond to Mrs. Lalouette's question, please? Or questions?
Through Mr. Mayor, just to inform council that Mr. Lalouette's letter was in the recommendation report. It was on page 105 and 108. We did include his new letter. We made reference to that on page 108, and it's attached as page 124. Our responses towards that letter were captured in our comments under page 65. So Mr. Lalouette's letters at the public presentation and again on January 18th are in the recommendation report.
Okay, so they are. Well,
Yes.
We didn't get it till Friday, so we didn't get through all 105 pages, I guess. We just saw the point forms at the beginning and thought that that was in. So that's good. Thank you for that.
The second question, Mr. Mayor, if an appeal is made, depending upon who's the appellant, we then provide the OMB with the entire package. We inform the OMB who participated at the public meetings, who made comments, who made written comments. That's all sent to the OMB, and then it's in the hands of the OMB to then reach out to the neighbors that were involved in the process. City is removed from that process. We then follow the direction from the OMB. The OMB would then contact the residents directly to inform them.
So we would be contacted as soon as the process started then?
Mr. Mayor, it would be the OMB that would make that decision. It's not our responsibility. We send them all the information, people that spoke out, and most certainly what they do is they then reach out to the individuals that made presentation based on who appealed and who is the party to that appeal, because there could be more than one appellant. So first step is what council's decision is, and then if there's an appeal one way in favor or opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina.
Thank you. So the next thing is he asked if the property was approved for rezoning. Does it mean that it would be pretty much impossible to stop them from proceeding with the southern portion or further development of the property? We were told that the application applies to the entire property with the exception of one block fronting Northland Avenue that will be rezoned to accommodate the street townhouses. Does this mean that the townhouses are being approved as a separate piece, or can you just explain that a little further?
Mr. Aquilina.
Through Mr. Mayor, what this application before council this evening would permit 25 rooms for senior living with supportive care, 10 senior citizen dwelling units, 20 rooms for lodging, and those would be in the actual building. At the northeast corner of the land, there is a block of land that would accommodate 6 street townhouse dwelling units.
So is that a different zoning, or is that why it's sort of being talked about separately, or?
Through Mr. Mayor, our zoning bylaw actually has a zoning classification for residential townhouse, so that's why you see the RT applied for that portion of the property.
So then he also feels that the stormwater issue is also a major issue there. There's the storm sewers, or the stormwater, how it will be handled with the possibility of the townhouses being built. There's no existing storm sewer on Northland, so this is something that the surrounding neighbors are very concerned about, as we already have flooding on Northland now when it rains. What if he decided to build more townhouses, also with possible future development to the south? To be a possibility, a storm sewer would have to be installed on Northland.
Director Hanson,
Is that a
are
possibility?
you in a better position to respond to that?
Through Mr. Mayor, if any development is proposed to the south, it requires a new zoning application. There would have to be supporting study to support that land use. That would look at if there's any issues dealing with stormwater management. One of the requirements would be a servicing study. What we felt with the 6 units fronting onto Northland Avenue, the matter of stormwater could be addressed through the site plan process.
So is it possible that it could be denied because a whole storm system would have to be put in? Like, that's just, these are like, we just don't have the detail to understand the whole system.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if a development to the rear of the property is going to be proposed, and if there's not sufficient ways to deal with the stormwater, it would not be something that staff could support if there wasn't a way to satisfactorily address the stormwater.
The next point is basically, I think Councillor Kenny already sort of indicated that, where on page 4 of 8 in the Planning Department proposal, it states that Councillor Kenny asked Mr. Veneri if the proposed townhouses were going to be used as low income. Mr. Veneri responded that they would not, but 2 paragraphs below his comment, Mr. Aquilina responded that Mr. Veneri is looking to have all proposed uses permitted. So it's a little bit conflicting. We were concerned with the request for rezoning. We're told one thing by the owner of the property and then told something else by Mr. Aquilina. We need to know exactly what we're getting in our backyards. It states that staff does not have jurisdiction and cannot regulate who rents, leases, or purchases these residential uses or lives in them. So we're not getting a straight answer as to what they're going to be used for.
Comment, Mr. Aquilina?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not too sure I follow that statement. The zoning of the property is proposed for the 20 rooms, 25 rooms, and for the 10 senior citizens apartment homes and residential townhomes on the northeast corner of the property. All lands around that building are not to be used for anything else, so I'm not sure I'm following that statement.
I think what we're trying to say is that we're not really sure what the use of those townhouses are going to be. Are they going to be low-income townhousing that is just going to be rented out, or are they going to be sold? Like, I think that makes a big difference in how the development gets accepted by the community as well.
Mr. Aquilina, can you comment?
Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that there would be freehold. They would be created, 6 units would be created, then they would be subdivided along each common wall to then be sold individually. So whoever's going to purchase each unit would have to have the financial means to purchase those units. So can't comment whether it's going to be someone that's of an affordable nature, but a street townhouse unit is something that is going to cost a little bit of money, for lack of a better word.
The next point is something that is really important. We asked about what happens if the owner tries and can't rent out the senior rooms. Can he then apply to increase the number of boarding rooms in the lodging? So there's 20 lodging, we understand that. There's 25 senior, and then 10, I think it was, senior assisted living. What's to stop the whole thing from just being lodging? And who's going to police that? And the answer we got was that the city won't be policing what goes on inside the building. And we have a right to formally make a complaint with the bylaw department if we think it's not in compliance. It seems kind of funny that the building's being illegally used for some time now, and it's been brought to all the council's attention, and absolutely nothing has been done about it. So that is a huge concern right now. We don't see how it will be any different in the future, so why segregate and say there's only going to be 20 for this, 25 for this, and 10 for this, when it's not even going to be monitored by anybody? So that's one of the concerns that we have.
Through Mr. Mayor,
can you comment?
Yes. If council does approve the report this evening, the actual number of rooms and units would be very specific. If one wanted to increase the rooms, they would then apply to the Committee of Adjustment for an increase in rooms, and then they have to be sure that there's proper parking on site. So that would be the requirement to increase the number of uses and rooms in that facility. You're still going to have lodging, you're still going to have senior care and senior citizens apartment house. Council is approving those uses with the specific number of rooms. If one wanted to go higher, they would need Committee of Adjustment approval to do so. They would require permits, and then yes, we do act on complaint basis. Depending on what that complaint is, it could trigger the need for our fire and emergency services to go through that facility, or it would be the building official, chief building official, or it could be the region of Niagara, depending upon the nature of that complaint.
Mr. Botter, you have a question about following from Mrs. Lalouette's questioning?
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm not sure that answer was the question you asked. I just need some clarification on that. So he's got 20 rooms here, 20 rooms here, and 25 rooms here. Can he juggle those around and just, I think that was the question.
No, the main point that I'm trying to make there is what's to stop the whole thing from happening to end up being 60 units of lodging.
Right, yeah, so he's juggling, he's taking the 20,
Yeah.
these seniors
And
putting it in the lodging.
I think that it would be a lot easier to get a minor variance or bylaw amendment after the fact, once the zoning has already been changed. And then, our concern is that then the whole thing ends up being a lodging home.
Mr. Ackerman, do you have a comment to that last?
Mr. Mayor, as I stated, if council approves this, there would be 20 rooms for lodging with no supportive care, 25 rooms for senior living with supportive care, 10 dwelling units, senior dwelling units. That's what council, if they approve it, that's all that can take place. If anyone wants to go with more, then the need would be for a Committee of Adjustment application to increase the rooms or units.
Yeah, and that's what we're saying. Like, it's, once you change the zoning, that minor variance is a lot easier to get, we feel. Like, is it not?
Through Mr. Mayor, I wouldn't say that necessarily. Committee of Adjustment under the Planning Act has to make those decisions as to what council does in the same vein. They look at all the policies. It has to meet different tests. But I wouldn't say it'd be an easy endeavor. We have to be sure that there are certain things, requirements that the zoning bylaw also takes a look into. Increase in parking. There's a whole bunch of other standards that need to be met. It does not grant someone an as of right to increase things or juggle things around. Council would be the one that's specifically tying in with what they want to see on the property now.
Okay.
Mrs. Lalouette, I don't want to necessarily cut you off, but do you have
running
many?
out of time?
Well, we want to make sure you have a fulsome understanding.
Yeah.
Council wants to make sure they have a fulsome understanding, but do you have many more questions?
No, really, a lot of it was brought up before with other councillors, so I can leave it at that. The one major point that I would like to just mention quickly is in the drawing. So let me just see what he's saying here. The drawing on page 6 of 12 in the planning development document. After getting our microscope out, we could see that there was a 75-foot offset between the abutting properties and the townhouses, the 6 townhouses where they start. We asked about that, what was going to happen with that 75 feet. And the answer we got was very vague, indicating that the minimum, they just talked about what the, basically what the minimum requirements were, and it still doesn't really explain what is going to happen with the 75 feet. It doesn't answer the question as to how high the buildings are going to be. If the 75 feet would be maintained for the entire abutting properties. So I guess what we're trying to say is there's just a lot of unanswered questions at this point. I also want to comment that...
Good. Wait, just hold there. Could you respond to that question?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Actually, the 75 feet is something that's not on the drawing. We saw that in your husband's letter, and it's actually 15 feet.
It's 15?
That's setback 15 feet. If you look at page 63 of the report, the easterly setback is 15 feet, and that's why the comment was about road. There was no understanding where the 75 feet came from, and you cannot put a road in between the side wall of the building and the property line. There's just not enough room, so that's why the comment in response was that there's no road that's going to go through there.
Okay, so then why weren't we told that it was 15 feet instead of 75? Because you couldn't even see the number, even with a microscope. Like, these are some of the issues that we have. And obviously, you know, it's a concern. We want to know what's going to be in our backyard.
Jacqueline, do you have a comment?
Mr. Mayor, I think we tried to properly address that in our responses back, that we did not understand where the 75 feet was coming from. When we see 15 feet, we assume that's what it was about, but there's no way a road can, if you look at the actual townhouse block in the sketch, there's no way a road can go through anywhere of that property.
Could I just interject here? There is someone who has a radio on in the room. It's squawked a number of times. I would ask them either to turn it off or to leave the room. Mrs. Lallouette, can you continue?
Yep, I'm pretty much finished. One thing that I did want to say, the last 2 things I want to say is we did take the liberty to call a real estate agent and just to ask their opinion on whether the value of our home would be affected by this. We were told that it could be affected between 5 to 10% and more if the property wasn't kept up, which in the past number of years the property hasn't been kept up. So they also said that it would limit the potential number of people that we would market our home to if we chose to sell. That's a big concern to us as well. And the last thing I want to say is that we lived there the whole time that Northland Manor was there, and we didn't have a single issue. And so if you're trying to say that it's comparable to that, the only thing I can say is that it's not, because we've already had issues with the current use of the property, and it nowhere compares to the previous use of the property when it was Northland Manor.
Thank you, Mrs. Lallouette.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Now, we have not had a request from the proponent to respond to any of these comments or questions. Mr. Veneri, do you wish to come forward? If I have permission from my fellow councilors to allow this to happen. But in the fullness of fairness, would someone like to make a motion and second it? Moved by Councillor Bodnar, second by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Mr. Veneri, could you come forward, please? And we have roughly 10 minutes for presentations.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak this evening. I've spent...
Could we just press the little red button there so we can hear throughout the chamber? Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening, Mayor. I've had the great opportunity to work with the Planning Department for the City of Port Colborne to put this project together. And I've gotten a lot of direction, and I've gotten a lot of feedback, and I've worked with them to develop what would be the best use of my property for the City of Port Colborne. Councillor Kenny's first words this evening were that she has lots of questions. That just astonished me because I've left her 2 voicemails. She has my email, and she hasn't responded to my voicemail to ask me a question. She hasn't responded to email, written an email to me to ask me any question whatsoever about the planning document that was submitted by the Planning Department over 2 months ago. The last council meeting that I was here, she stood up and said that she needed more time to review the document. It's understandable. I guess it was just given a few days to all the council members. Today, where she says that she has lots of questions, I haven't seen, she hasn't responded to me directly, otherwise I would have answered those questions either by email or by phone because she has my phone number. The only thing that I received from Councillor Kenny was a picture of 2 boats on my property that were stored by the owner. That's the last email that I've ever received by her, and Mr. Gabrielina has answered that the person renting the building is allowed to store those boats there. I know that the residents around Northland Manor have had full use of the whole property for the last 10 years since I purchased it. And they're probably worried about change or what's going to be happening to the property. I filled out an application at the Planning Department. I've answered every question. The questions that I needed clarification on, I answered them. The Planning Department's come back with specific answers to every person's comment about what issues they may have with the property, with what the structures would look like, property values, a variety of answers to all of them, supporting that this is a project that should go forward. When I was here at the last council meeting, Mayor, I was taken aback by one of the presentations that was presented. The person came up and said that the building was full of mold, she was sick from being in there. Immediately after that meeting, I went to the Port Colborne, I went to the manor, I went through the building, I looked around, I didn't see any of the things that she had said. I went home, I emailed Councillor Kenny and asked her if she wanted to come visit because I went there and there was nothing, none of the things that she said were true. And I had been to the building about 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks prior to that. Councillor Kenny said that she would be able to go in a month, or it ended up being a month where she ended up, a month after that she went through the building. What concerned me the most about that, Mayor, and that's why I tried to call you, and I think we played phone tag for a little bit, is that the person that came up and made that presentation had spoken to Councillor Kenny prior to making the presentation. She had actually visited with Councillor Kenny to tell her that the building had mold in it, that it had a faulty system or it was dirty. And Councillor Kenny didn't go to the building to check that out. She didn't go and investigate. She waited till that person made a public presentation about saying things that were completely untrue and had a biased opinion prior to this proposal even going forward. I'm not running the current manor or the residents in that home, but I've been there and I've talked to them and I've seen them. Some of them pay $300 a month, some of them pay $4, some pay $5. That's my understanding. And they have a place to eat, have a place to stay, and that is what their means are at this time. And there are a lot of people like that. As you know, there's a big initiative in the Niagara region to help people that cannot find housing. Those people do not get care by the person that's renting that building from. They're not providing food, they're not providing essential services. Those people are getting services from March of Dimes, they're getting services from Niagara Housing or Regional Housing, and those actual agencies go into the building to help those people. If it's CCAC, if it's Care Partners or St. Elizabeth Nurses, that people need certain services, those people are going into the building and providing those services to those people. The person renting the building is not providing those services. And I'm simply renting that building as an owner, but I'm concerned about the well-being of what people are. I'm concerned about their health. I'm concerned about their safety. So I investigated as soon as that issue was brought up the last time I was here. Mike Bendia, the fire marshal, has been to the building numerous times. He has an open blank policy to go in anytime he wants to look at anything in the building. He doesn't have any restrictions. And he's told me, he's informed me that we're up to code in every aspect. It's not a minimal guideline that we're following. We're following what is established in the province of Ontario for fire safety. I know, Mr. Main, you had a question about Mr. Bendia about different aspects of the building. We've already discussed that with planning, that we'll need to make changes depending on the uses of that building. They'll have different codes. And unfortunately, I can't see that far, but I can't, Councillor, your first name is Dave, but I can't see that far from there. Elliot, sorry, I can't see. I have to get my eyes checked. That, you made mention is that, in order, once the building is rezoned, then we actually can go to the other agencies and get the proper safeties and approvals to make the renovations, to make the fire system safe, to get our licensing to do that. But we can't do it until we get the planning and zoning changed. Councillor Kenney said that, I came up and I gave conflicting information. She said that this evening. I just read the minutes, and Mrs. Alouette just mentioned them now. The question was asked, will my townhouses be low income? And I responded, no, they will not be low income townhouses. And Mr. Aguilina just responded, we'll build them, sever them, and sell them to whoever can pay for them. Whoever needs they fit. They'll be very similar to those that Lester Schultz has built on his property. So I'm a bit concerned, Mayor, that first I have one side of your council that's saying that they don't have enough information, they have some questions, and they're concerned about aspects that aren't even aspects because the people that are in the home currently are not receiving any care. They are renting a room, like a student would rent a room in a house or an apartment going to school. And that's basically what the building is providing for them. They're not providing any care, any services whatsoever. The Ministry, the Health Ministry of Health has been in, the region has been in the building numerous times. And all of it, as it says in the planning report, has come back fine. There's not an issue with anything at all. I can understand, the residents being concerned about what's going to be there. And it's a difficult process for me to understand. And I spend a lot of time with the planning department to understand it. But anything that I do build or anything process that I go forward, I do have to come back and follow the proper rules to do that. If I'm going to build a house or build a structure, it has to conform with what's there for the residences. I don't want to make the properties that I'm building less value. I'd like to increase the value. If there's a question that a councillor would like to ask me, I'm more than willing to answer it.
Is there any questions of Mr. Veneri from members of council? Councillor Danch.
I was one of the councillors that had a look at your building, of course, and we went through it, and I got a bit of a construction background in that, and you're looking at a building with maybe some tired-looking ceiling tiles and different things like that. Last year, I went through an OMB hearing because something was going on in my neighborhood, and one thing that property owner did was he sat down with the owners of the property before it went to an OMB and answered those questions that the people had, and he made some changes in what he was doing to ensure that air conditioners weren't on the outside of the buildings, so they would keep people awake, and landscaping was looked after, and he worked with us and the one neighbor that was in her backyard. Maybe if you were to sit down with these people at a Tim Hortons and something like that and get some of these one-to-one questions. I didn't find your building all that bad. I mean, a blanket on the floor to me is not a bedroom. That's just somewhere to crash. The kitchen was clean. There were no ants, stuff like that. But I think maybe if you could sit down with someone like Dave and his wife there and a few of the others and possibly satisfy them with some fencing ideas you might have to ensure that their privacy will still be there, because they've had basically no one in their backyard for the last 10 years. Just a suggestion.
That's a good suggestion. In the last meeting, I gave Dave my cell number and my office number to call me. And then I did further looked into that situation and wondered why, he articulated well, his wife's articulated well tonight, why they wouldn't just call me and give me their concerns. and asked me questions specifically. So I went to one of my landscapers, and he provided me some pictures of when there's a big party, the Alouettes use my yard for, the Atlanta Manor, for parking their cars. And my landscaping guy got upset that he ruined the grass and that they put in a fire pit on my property. I gave him my number. I've tried that, and I will try again because I think it's a good option, and it's a good way to resolve things. And I'm not adverse to listening and giving information. There are some of the residents that I have spoken to, and I have addressed their concerns. And I have called the planning department because one of the residents has 2 deaf children. And when I spoke to his regularly, I said that was a pretty legitimate concern. So I'd like to get his name and try to look him up to call him. And I've addressed that person that lives in the area that's concerned about, his children and if there's an increase of traffic. So I've done those little things, but Mr. Elliott has not called me. And I asked him, I gave him both the numbers to reach me. But I could try again. But that's a good suggestion. It's easier to resolve things that way than anyways. And I appreciate you saying that the building was in fairly good shape. It's unfortunate. Sometimes people don't have a bed when they're going to rent a room, and that's all they use is a blanket. I didn't see that when I was there. But I have met some of the residents there that maybe are in transition or looking for places to stay warm and to be
Thank you,
housed.
Mr. Veneri. Councillor Demery has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Veneri. Mr. Veneri, I just want to address a few things. First, when you say that Councillor Kenny took too long to come and look at the building, and when she did come, it had been cleaned where a former resident had reported it being full of mold and that. I must say that when the 5 of us councillors went to visit the building in block, we very clearly saw signs of mold bleached out. I know what that looks like on that material, and you could see where the mold had grown in the washrooms. So it had been there at some point. I'm not a chemist, I didn't take samples, but I got to tell you, I know by eye what that looks like, and it was there. So there is that. As to meeting with the residents, you're the one who wants something from them. I would suggest you call a meeting. Get the spot, use the building itself, invite them all in to talk about the issues, rather than waiting for them to individually approach you to accommodate you for something you want. It just makes more sense for you to cater to their needs. And as to affordable housing, I did actually put that question to you when you came and asked about affordable housing or low-income housing, because we all know that those are very different things. You said there would be no low-income or affordable housing, and at that meeting. And since then, it appears that there will be. There will be no low-income housing, that's for sure. And if I were you, I would speak to your managers, because you're quoting people live there as low as $300 a month, but the people that were there did not say that. There was a $700 ceiling, and I believe it started at $450 or $500 a month. So, and those were for tiny little rooms. So, just to be really clear on that, let's set that record straight. My decisions were made because I did speak to your manager and your manager's assistant and a lot of the people involved with that and spent a lot of time doing research and consulting professionals about what should be offered, and I don't have great confidence in things the way they stand today. That doesn't mean it wouldn't change in the future, but I think more work is needed on your part.
Thank you. I didn't get a question. I just got your statement. Okay. Well, then I'll respond. Is that the health department went through the building prior to council and after council going, and they didn't find any mold or find any health problem whatsoever. None. Zero. The building inspector from City of Port Colborne's come through, didn't find any violations or any problems at all with the building at all. Not a problem whatsoever. In the minutes, the question is, it says, it could be an error, I guess, if you think you asked me the question, but the question comes specific from Councillor Kenny asking me about the townhouses, and my answer to that was no. So, but I appreciate you looking at that.
Councillor Maine?
Through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Veneri. I'll make it quick. It seems to me that there is a gap between you and the manager and us. I went with Councillor Kenny after the last meeting. I don't think it was much more than a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. You told us at the time that anytime we wanted to go visit. So we did. I suffer from asthma. As soon as I opened that door, I darn near choked. There was a woman that had 2 dogs and 2 cats in one room. All I could smell was cat urine and dog crap. So coming in there, your manager disappeared. So the person that came out of the room was the person who gave us the tour. Your manager just took off, he went into his room, he wouldn't come out. And that's the truth. I wouldn't say that if it wasn't true. And we walked through, I looked at a few of the bathrooms, I thought, I don't think I'd use them. And one lady said she cleans the bathrooms. And then the manager told us the second time that he has a cleaning company comes in and cleans. The second time we went in there, I went in with the rest of them because we wanted to go again and bring the other people. There was so much free breeze that my asthma acted up again and I had to go back outside. I think there is a definite gap between you and your manager. What your manager's doing and what your perception of what the manager's doing could be a big problem. And it comes right back on us. That's what I see, that's what I smell, and those are the decisions I have to go by. You can tell us everything you want, but there's a definite gap between you and your manager. Has to be.
Any comment, Mr. Veneri?
Well, I'm renting the building, and that person, in order to be successful, is going to have to provide care for the people that he's renting it to. I would prefer that the building be in excellent condition and it be perfect. I have allergies. I'm allergic to dogs and cats myself. It's already been brought up by Councillor Dave and Dan Aguilina that anyone running that building will have to follow the guidelines that are in place to do that, to make sure. And if he's providing bad service, then he's not going to have any tenants in that building. He won't have anyone there, and his business will fail. And then I'll have to find another tenant for that wing of the building.
Councillor May?
Just a quick comment to that. You have people who are pretty low income, and there's no place for these people to go. And I know under the Planning Act it's altogether different, but when you've got people in there who have no place to go, no place to rent, they're stuck. They're stuck in the conditions they're in. And I know that you're renting it out to another guy, you're an absentee landlord, you don't get down here that often, you have a business in St. Catharines down the other end, but I think it's imperative that you find out what's going on in there. I really do.
You're right. But each of those people have caseworkers or workers that are helping them to see them on a weekly or monthly basis. I would say a majority of them do. So they have someone that provides a rent check for them. They have some of them that takes them to doctor's appointments. So they have people seeing them.
Thank you, Mr. Veneri. Councillor Kenny has a question.
I do. Mr. Veneri, are you the owner of the property?
Yes.
And you have a property manager that you told us was going to be finished in December 2015. Is he finished?
No, he's not finished.
Okay, so you've kept that person on?
No, that's not what I said. I said I don't have a property. You said I have a property manager?
Yeah.
No, I don't have a property manager.
So this person that gave us the tour that day on your recommendation, because I had gone first, John and I had gone at first, Councillor Mean and I, and then you called me up on the phone and said, oh, I would have liked it better if you let me know when you were coming.
No, I didn't do that either.
Yeah, you did, because you told me that you called me twice and you did not.
I've left you 2 messages, Councillor Kenny.
Well,
I can give you the dates. I
really don't think
Anyways, I don't want to hear about that. I
really
just want to know.
elementary right now.
Then the 5 of us went.
Councillor Kenny, ask me a question.
Yeah,
I'll
that's what I
answer
want to
it.
ask you.
What's the
Is that
question?
not your property manager?
No.
That walked us around?
No, that's not. I have no property manager. I rent out the building.
Well, who is that person?
I assume you were speaking to the person that was renting the building from me. I'm not sure who you spoke to. I didn't know when you went.
No, his name is Sean White.
Then that's the person I rent the building to. If that's who you saw, I don't have a property manager. I don't have anyone. He rents and takes care of the whole property himself.
Yes. And his lease is not up in December.
No, it's not.
That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Veneri.
Thank you.
Yeah, never mind. He did not call me. I believe you.
I personally am a little bit of a quandary here. This was deferred from December 14th for more information, as I understood. We're now back at the first opportunity. And I have 4 councillors who indicate to me they don't have all the answers to all the questions. I'm reluctant that a decision would be made without councillors having all the answers that they require. I also have one ratepayer also indicated that she has additional questions, although certainly Mr. Aquilina did as much as he could to explain the situation to her. I'm just wondering whether a proper disposition at this time is not a disposition, but to defer it one more cycle for questions for people to put in writing, for answers to be responded to in writing, so that when we come back here in 2 weeks, no one can say that they have more questions, because they've had that opportunity to provide these questions and an opportunity for the proponent to respond to them, or our planner. If there's any stomach for that, then I would entertain a motion to defer to the next council meeting once again. If there's no motion coming forward, then I have no alternative to call for the question on the recommendation. Councillor Butler, you had your hand up?
Just a question to your comments, Mr. Mayor. No answers to questions on planning? Because I thought it was a pretty thorough report on the planning part. A lot of the questions seem to be on the business side of what may happen. I guess. The
reality is that the decision should be made on planning principles.
Yes.
We also appreciate that, from what we've heard, some individuals may not make that decision based on planning principles. We've had an offer of the proponents to meet, and it doesn't matter to me who calls the meeting as long as it would be called. Councillor Danch has indicated a resolution to a situation that he's familiar with resulted from this meeting. OMB hearings are very expensive, and certainly few of us, certainly even the city, doesn't like the fact of having to go to the OMB and what that's going to cost. Am I right? Perhaps $60,000, is that a figure that we might entertain as a potential estimate? I guess you can't get an exact estimate because you don't know how it's going to come down at the hearing.
Correct, Mr. Mayor. It all depends on how many days these solicitors need to weigh the evidence and all the people that are under subpoena. That, as Councillor Elliott alluded to, the last OMB hearing that the city participated in, that was a $33,000 price tag for the municipality that was for planning, evidence, and as well as legal costs. So it all depends on how many days of a hearing. It could be 30 plus thousand for a 3-4 day hearing.
What I'm looking for is perhaps we can resolve this problem without having to go to the OMB if people are reasonable. Again, a 2-week deferral is not huge, but I'm at council's decision in that respect. If someone makes the motion to defer, we'll entertain whether it will succeed or not. If not, then we'll call for the recommendation call for the question on the recommendation. Councillor Butters.
I just have a question. Would the deferral be on the premise that it would give Mr. Veneri and the residents a window of opportunity to meet as Councillor Danch suggested? Is that kind of like your purpose of
Yes,
deferral?
but I would include members of council in that who tell me this evening that they still have unanswered questions. So as I see it as a 3-way street.
Fair enough.
Can I ask one more question?
Certainly.
Are the residents and Mr. Veneri interested in that idea? Because you get that opportunity, do you want to take it?
Mr. Veneri?
Yes, Mr. Veneri.
Yeah.
I see some heads, is that nodding this way or? Yes? Okay, well then I'll put a deferral on the table to give that process a chance to work. Absolutely.
So you're making a motion to defer this to a 2-week period. The next date is February 8th. So that's the motion. Is there a seconder for that motion? Pardon me?
can't debate.
Councillor Desmarais, seconded. Let's call the question. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The motion's carried. And I would ask the residents as well as Mr. Veneri, can you put your heads together? And if you need a meeting space, we can provide that rather than meeting at Tim Hortons. That's not a very, it's a very public place, not a private place. Councillor Bodnar?
Mr. Mayor, just to pick up on maybe what Councillor Kenny said, where and how, I would suggest maybe being at a number of these meetings that there be a moderator there, that someone can buffer the meeting so that everybody gets a chance to speak and answer. And I'm just throwing that out. That might be, a good way to make sure the meeting really achieves what everybody is, hopeful that it will. So I'll just throw that out there, but I'll just recommend that somebody chair the meeting that will, have it controlled, make sure everybody gets a chance to speak, ask the questions, and, just from experience, sometimes that works good.
Thank you for the suggestion, Mr. Bodnar. Next. Poses another question. Who do we have as moderator who would be sort of independent of the ratepayers, of Mr. Veneri, and of city administration? And were you going to suggest a date, Mr. Aquilina?
Mr. Mayor, not to get into this discussion at this time, but just looking at my calendar, Family Day is the 8th, so the earliest council could meet. On BC. Okay, thank you. To get a report, I'm not sure if council is looking for a report in response to this meeting to come back to council.
Council meeting's on the 8th.
Just looking at the timing of things to actually coordinate, and if it's in fact council wanting a new report to include all of the discussions, that doesn't leave much time to have that meeting and then to respond if some residents are going to be asking additional questions. So I would ask that, I'll get it as soon as I can, but I can't promise, depending upon the nature of the questions and the cooperation that's received and accommodated during this meeting.
If questions were submitted in writing, that would assist you in responding.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, we have responded, but I will include those again. I know council has received the responses, but if council wants those in a report, that's easily done. It's not a problem.
Well, can I suggest that we have questions submitted by a week today? I mean, we've all hashed this over. It's not as if it's brand new in our minds. Is a week sufficient time? I'm just looking for an indication from those who wish additional information. Mrs. Lalouette, you're good with a week? Okay.
When do we have budget again?
Tomorrow. So do you want to have it in the second meeting?
No, deadline for
I'm not
questions is
available
a
on
week
the
today.
4th.
But for staff?
Only in the day.
Unless we do the second meeting in February.
Right. The suggestion by the CAO is that it's impossible for our planner to prepare a report based on questions and answers until the second meeting in February. Are you content with having a response by the second meeting?
Is that good?
I heard that's fine. Okay, so questions in a week today. Into Mr. Aquilina.
Mr. Mayor, if the questions that we are to answer are the ones that were submitted by Mr. Lalouette on January 18th, we can answer those tomorrow because we've done that. But if there's other questions that came up tonight, especially we got a new document tonight.
We have 4 members of council who have indicated they still have questions, and they have not been elicited, set out in a nice question and answer from as Mr. Lalouette has done.
Then, as Mr. Louis said, then we can do that at earliest opportunity.
Perhaps to your comment, Mr. Bonner, we're trying to resolve this, and if we have to take extra efforts to do so, and then we'll make the decision based hopefully on planning issues, not, Councilor Elliott?
And my apologies, but there hasn't been one single question on planning at all. None, zero, nada.
Yeah, you made that in your
So,
presentation.
I know.
You
So
made
that's
that very clear.
that's why I'm a little bit frustrated, is because we're talking about having meetings to talk with the proponent and the residents, and I get your concerns, I really do. But from our perspective, this is a planning issue. And I know planning isn't exciting, but it's a planning issue, and there hasn't been a question directed to Dan about planning at all about this proposal, which is, I think Councillor Bodner's as frustrated as I am.
Councilor Elliott, we have had a motion to defer consideration.
And I get that. I understand.
you know how you
I'm
vote.
not debating the deferral. It's already been passed. I'm not debating that.
Okay.
But I'm trying to find out and understand what we're going to get out of the meeting. What are we?
Hopefully we'll get a resolution. Councilor Butters?
Towards
I want to
planning?
move forward with our agenda tonight.
I understand that. But I'm trying to understand, are we getting a resolution out of the planning issue that's at hand?
This is about people in a neighborhood who would really like a chance to resolve this with Mr. Veneri. And I thought that was the mayor's suggestion, was to give them that opportunity.
I understand
And if
that.
it helps a project move forward or not, I don't have a crystal ball, but it'll give these residents that opportunity to sit with him and maybe hash out what needs to be hashed out.
Okay. This is the final word. People will have their questions in week today. That includes members of council. And then we'll have responses to those, and hopefully we'll get an answer to those questions. And then in the second meeting in February, we will move on this recommendation. And there will be a vote. Okay?
One more question. I just want to know a date. I want to know a date we're going to meet with him. Pick a date. Give me a date so I can write it in my calendar. I'm just as busy as any other councillor, so I'm suggesting Thursday the 11th, if that's good.
Mr. Veneri, is that good for you?
So Thursday the 11th at the former Northland Manor, so they can see what it's like inside, because this is their concerns?
Is there some objection to meeting here at City Hall? A completely independent place.
Okay, Thursday the 11th at City Hall then? 6:30? Pardon me?
That sounds good to me.
Thursday, so we want it, Thursday, 11th of February, and our staff report is going to be the next Tuesday.
Yes.
So I think you're too late. I think I do the first week of February, first week.
Well, we have budget meetings every night, so how are we going to do that?
Mr. Aquilina, you can make those deadlines?
Mr. Mayor, just looking at the procedural bylaw as to when we have to have the report in by, we're way past the deadline. So if the public meeting or the meeting to take place is on the 11th and the council meets the 22nd, it doesn't give much time to properly address comments if they're ones that we can't address. So I guess it's all going to depend on what we get to have to respond to. We'll try our darndest. I just don't want to make a false promise, that's all.
All right, we'll cross that bridge perhaps when we come to it. Okay, any questions on timing, schedule? Okay, let's continue with our agenda this evening then. Next item is item number 8, and that is Madam Kenny. Councilor Kenny?
It's going to be released on the computer. So you have a few days in here. You know what I mean? If possible. All depends what the questions are.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Engineering and Operations, Engineering Division Report number 2016-03, subject project number 2015-18, Helen Street Road closure.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Main? Discussion? Councillor Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several questions. First of all, I want to say thank you for finally getting to this. The individual, the purchaser of this property, has been waiting a long time for us to come across with an answer to his problem of people crossing his property, which is now private property. And it's taken a lot of time for us to come up with this. I think that happened, Mr. Aquilina, how many years ago did and if I could ask the question to Mr. Aquilina, how many years ago was this property sold?
Through Mr. Mayor, 2014, because the next step was to change the zoning and official plan.
Thank you. So in 2014, we sold the property. It's now 2016, and I need to know a couple of questions through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ron. I guess I'm concerned on page 167 of the report where it says excavation and regrading of the existing Parks Yard asphalt area to improve drainage on the property and to alleviate existing surface water ponding in this area. Are we not moving our Parks Department? So to me, it just seems to be like money not well spent.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kenny, we agree. In doing the survey of this property in 2015 and doing the design, it became obvious that the drainage was a huge issue. The asphalt in front of the Parks Yard was in very poor condition. So what staff have done is they've tendered and designed this project with all considerations: asphalt, drainage, fencing, all the considerations that were in here. The biggest overriding issue, I think, for council, we present these options for you tonight, is whether the city is going to actually retain this property for any period of time beyond the opening of the new operations center. If in fact they are, the expenditure of funds on this property for fencing and several of the other issues, drainage, doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless it's determined that the property is going to be retained and it should be fenced and segregated from the West Side Arena property. So that's the reason we put in a lot of these different options, and we can kind of step you through some of the things we're proposing here that have been costed out. But a lot of it depends on actually the value of the Quonset hut and the storage building. And we've heard at past council meetings that there is a demand in the city for storage facilities. We're currently renting a number of, we've purchased and are renting a number of sea containers because there's such a lack of storage facilities for a lot of the equipment, a lot of the materials. So we bring this forward tonight to get council's input on determining whether they'd be willing to dispose of this site. And in fact, if the site were to be disposed to an adjoining neighbor, if that was the case, on the public market, we may not need this fencing. We may not need to improve all the drainage on the site. Since this arena was built in 1960, there's been a drainage problem here. There's always water laying on it. Would it be viable for us now to try to solve a lot of these drainage problems if we're going to dispose of the property in a year and a half? So that's part of the question that goes back to council. What do you envision with this property, and how do you want to see it treated at the present time? We've tried to outline a couple of the minimum requirements, and obviously the first one would be to create a cul-de-sac on Helen Street in front of the tennis club, put some barriers up there and put the gate in for the facility that's there now. That would accommodate everything for the next year and a half. Beyond that, the drainage, the fencing around the site, and some of the other amenities may not be necessary depending on what we're doing with the property. So that's why we bring a lot of these options forward to get council's input on that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But I'm, for one, don't think that that's a necessary expenditure. That's just me looking at it. The main thing for me, and you know that because I've met with you, I've met with Jim Hennepin, I've met at the site, the purchaser of the property, I've met with him several times. He's come to that area. The main thing for me was to make sure that we did that cul-de-sac that we're doing on Helen Street, that residents that live in the property near there, who have always used the arena to access, to go over to the mall, to do their shopping, to do no frills and all that, that there was a walkway for them to get there. And I see that you've got an installation of a new concrete sidewalk along the west side of the tennis club, terminating at the baseball diamonds. So when it terminates at the baseball diamonds, where are they going to walk to get over, I guess, the highway or West Side Road, whatever you'd like to call it, and get onto a sidewalk so they can get into, and also for children, my grandchildren being some of them who use the Rose Shemansky Park to do some sledding and some tobogganing in the winter when we do have snow. And if we don't get any, I don't care. But just anyways, it's, I just want to know that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kenny. We've shown this sidewalk which would terminate at the city's property on the north side. So they would be allowed to walk either along the baseball fields or through that paved area to get over to West Side Road. There aren't currently sidewalks on West Side Road either. So this is strictly a sidewalk which would extend the Helen Street sidewalk to the city's property. It gives you a walkway to get to city property. There wasn't a price put in or a design put in to actually complete a sidewalk all the way to West Side Road. That wasn't, we didn't think that was a request of council. The cost of this sidewalk, I can tell you, is about $9,000. That's the cheapest option right now in extending that sidewalk. There would be a maintenance issue with this sidewalk. In the winter time, it being city property that's abutting, we would have to plow this sidewalk on a regular basis during the winter if it were constructed.
And, sorry, just have a couple more. And would there be a fence along the north side of that property as well? So they could not cross at all on the new owner's property?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Kenny. I know staff had discussions with the owner of the arena property on several occasions. It was his wish that the fence be installed between his property and the tennis club. We aren't recommending that right now. There's never been a fence there. And again, that'd just be an extra cost. So we hadn't recommended this as part of the property to separate the two parcels.
And I guess my question then was, how are we going to assure that the residents don't walk on private property, because that's his property?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, there's no reason that the property owner couldn't install the fence himself to keep people off his property. Okay. That's what other property owners do. Any new developments, a plaza or a commercial development, they put a fence around the site. So whether the city might be amenable to a cost sharing, I think that's been broached maybe with the owner. But our first approach would be, as far as the east boundary of the property behind the old arena, that the property owner, if he has security concerns, he would install a fence himself.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor May?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson. When I read this report, I thought, holy cow, we got 200 and change for the building, and it's going to cost us 200 and change just to close Helen Street. That's kind of like a 0-0 there. And the other thing was, I can't see, if we're going to be spending $12 million plus on a new operations center, I can't see spending one dime on the old building, because if we're going to start fixing up the old buildings, what the heck do we need a new building for? It'd be my thoughts to forget that, if we get a year and a half out of that building, sell it, let the next guy worry about what it needs as far as drainage goes and what it needs as far as fences go and all the other things that go with it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ron. Ron, when we build that new building for the Works Yard, Am I wrong in saying that we're still going to need more storage than that building's going to give us? Or will that building alleviate all the off-site storage that we now occupy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The simple answer is there's never enough storage. The new facility has indoor storage for a lot of the equipment, the mowers, some of the cold area storage that we use now for some of the equipment. There is a provision for that in the new facility. We would also envision quite a bit of outdoor storage at the new facility, including our containerized system in the short term. So we can accommodate what we need for operations in the new facility. I think one of the overriding thoughts on this particular facility is, number one, we don't want to segregate our operations as we are now. We want everything consolidated into one facility. But there's been an overriding thought that storage is at a premium in the city. I know Pokemar has been in and asked about storage and others. Again, it's just council's direction. This property here, this Quonset hut and the better part of the storage building here, there would be some market for it. I think two of the abutting property owners have expressed an interest in this particular parcel, so I think it has some value on that basis. Certainly not $270,000 and probably not even $170,000 in terms of what we might have to spend to at least accommodate what's in front of you tonight. So probably the best recommendation would be to just minimize what's required here, which is simply the cul-de-sac and the barriers to ensure the traffic doesn't go through Mr. Templain's property. Beyond that, if Mr. Templain, as an example, weren't the new owner of this land, if it were to be sold, then the fence may be necessary. And we could always probably look at that in the future. And a year and a half from now, who's to say we couldn't install that fence as we vacated this property? So that would be another option. What became really apparent to us in doing the survey and doing this design is that there's some pretty serious drainage issues there. So in doing the minimum, in creating this cul-de-sac and the barriers, there's still going to be a drainage issue. If that green line you see on your plan on the options, which is a proposed storm sewer from the ditch going towards the cul-de-sac, if that's not built, there's still going to be some drainage issues which wouldn't be resolved until we actually go into the arena area and actually build some capital storm sewers in that area. And that would be sort of the long-term solution to the drainage areas, or the drainage problems that you see here.
Any other questions? There being none, call for the question. All those in favor of the recommendation? 1, 2, 3.
Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is option 3, which includes a drainage system for it and the other basic components of the cul-de-sac and the fencing that is on the north and west boundaries of the current line. So based on the $170,000, we thought we'd recommend going forward to budget with whatever components council decided they wanted to go through with budget. That 170 can be reduced based on whatever components. If we were to defer the fencing, for instance, that amount, which is in the report, would come off. If the sidewalk were deferred, that could come off the 170. So I think the basic one that is in option 2, I believe, is about $95,000, which constructs the cul-de-sac itself and some of the basic amenities that are in there. So depending on what council's feelings are in this, you may want to amend the option 3 to delete some of those specific items that are proposed in the tender.
Councillor Kenny, that's your recommendation. Did you?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Main on that. Like, I don't think we should be spending any money on the Parks Yard at all. 'Cause it's, when it sells as is, and that's it. So, like I said, if they've addressed the fact that of concerns that the residents in that area have given me, and that's a walkway from Helen with the sidewalk from Helen over to the north end of that building, and then they can walk along there, that's fine. So that was a big concern. I know that this sidewalk, though, is on the inside of the tennis court, or on the outside of the fence that's already up there.
Mr. Mayor, that sidewalk would be on the, what we'd call the tennis club property.
Yeah.
It's east of Mr. Templane's property.
Right.
And on city property. So it would be an extension of the existing sidewalk that ends in front of the tennis club and would extend northerly to the city's property north of the old arena.
Right. But this sidewalk, though, there's a fence that runs around the whole back of that, right?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, the fence isn't included on the east boundary of Mr. Templane's property. It's strictly a sidewalk which would run just west of the tennis club.
The fence around the tennis courts.
There's a fence around the tennis courts.
It's outside that. Yeah.
Yes, it's outside that. It goes right across. Just go down to the first plan. It's the one that shows the sidewalk. You can see the fence.
Yeah.
Just go down a bit. The other way.
And there's no way that
So the sidewalk goes between the property line and the fence at the tennis courts. It goes in between. So there'd be a fence, if that was the question. The fence for the tennis courts are east of the sidewalk. There's no fence on the west side of it.
and I believe when we met with Mr. Templane at that site, that was his concern.
Mr. Templane wanted the entire site fenced. We
Oh, I know that.
We weren't
and
recommending that.
And I told him that I would not support that either, but I did believe that when we closed off the Helen Street access, so people could not obviously drive through there anymore, there's going to be a gate, right? And the gate will be closed only at all times, except when they're going in and out.
Scroll it up some. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just not that far. Just to be clear, there's a guide rail, the orange circle you see there.
Yeah.
There's a guide rail, that yellow line that runs just outside the cul-de-sac. There's a guide rail that would prevent anybody from getting any kind of access through there, ATVs, or you'd have to walk along the sidewalk to actually get through there. So it's not fenced, but there is a guide rail around the cul-de-sac to prevent anybody from going westerly.
You can't climb over a guide rail.
Not the vehicle.
I'm talking a person.
I would defer that.
Yeah, 'cause that's what people will be doing. That's the top of it. Yeah.
This is the gate here.
I shouldn't have told it unless we had that ready then. That's all I feel. So I guess my concern would be the money that, in option 3 with the drainage part, if you're putting one now by Helen Street, has there always been an issue with drainage on Helen Street too? Has there? Sorry.
There is a drainage issue on Allen Street, yes.
And you're putting a catch basin there, right?
Well, that's where the money comes in.
Yeah.
We go from $90,000 to $170,000. If you see the green line that's extended on this plan from the ditch on West Side Road, there's a couple catch basins on it. That's really the only way to get all of the water, the surface drainage, away to the drainage system. That's another $80,000 to do that. So the suggestion could be that that be deferred or not be done. It's the value of the property would be the value as it is without a drainage system. The remainder of the West Arena property doesn't have a drainage system. It's surface drainage. Our main concern here in looking at this design was trying to handle the water at the cul-de-sac, and there's no way to do that other than extending the storm sewer easterly to the cul-de-sac.
Mhm. Yeah, I would have to ask well, it's money that, to me, not well spent anyway. But,
What I could suggest, Mr. Mayor, depending on council's direction, if they direct which components of this that they would prefer to see on the site, we could bring forward, as suggested at budget, a listing of, cost listing of all those items and the budget item for consideration at our first budget meeting beyond tomorrow's meeting, which is the overview. We could have a more detailed costing of each one of the components, whether it's just the fence or just the cul-de-sac, as part of that recommendation.
Decline to move forward with this recommendation until after?
Council's direction could be that they direct us to cost out what the minimum requirements would be here, whether, if you want to defer the fencing, if you want to defer the storm sewer and simply construct the cul-de-sac and the sidewalk perhaps, as you suggested, we can bring a costing forward to do that for consideration at council, at budget, I'm sorry.
that would be my recommendation.
So
That would be
you
my recommendation.
wish
The
to-
cul-de-sac and the sidewalk, that's it.
So you've moved the recommendation number option, which included option number 3. You and your seconder wish to withdraw that and then put forward a new motion based on the comments we've just heard. Okay, who seconded that recommendation? You did? John Main, are you content to withdraw that recommendation? Absolutely. Or that option? Okay, Mrs. Kenny, now do you wish to make a new recommendation?
Are you, Mayor? That's my recommendation. So option 4, is there an option, this cul-de-sac and the sidewalk? Thank you.
So the only
And
words-
defer the rest. If at budget time, if we have money, well, and we'll discuss that then. But right now, we've got to keep costs down there. And the main thing is to close off that street to traffic going through on private property. And I'm a bad one to do that, so.
Madam Clerk, do you have all that? Yes, please. Madam Clerk will read the recommendation so it's clear in everyone's mind.
That staff be directed to cost out the minimum requirements to include construction of the cul-de-sac and the sidewalk and for the rest of the items included in the project at this time.
Seconder, Mr. Main, are we ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item number 10, Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Engineering Operations and Engineering Division, report number 2016-5, subject road authority requirements for Canada's new railway crossing regulations.
Seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Kenny. Discussion? Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really just lifted this because I was going to ask what advantage this would give us toward fixing the crossing at the Weir Bridge, but that was spoken to earlier this evening, so that's all I really had to say on the matter.
Any further discussion? There being none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Item number 17, Councillor Demery.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Alistair Davis, Chief Executive Officer, Habitat for Humanity Niagara, RE 320 Bell Street, Port Colborne, RE request for refund of building permit fees and replacement of water supply line.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Butters. Discussion. Councillor Demery, did you lead the discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really what I wanted to understand was from staff what the cost of the water supply line would be, and would we be able to do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Demery. I had a brief discussion with the CBO who actually observed the galvanized line that's on this property. It's very shallow. It's galvanized, has to be replaced. It's sitting on the rock. So on that basis, it's probably going to be at least in the range of about $5,000 to $6,000 would be my guess. We don't typically, as a municipality, install water lines on private property. So I'm not sure what council's direction would be in this case. Whether the direction would be to have us tender and actually have a contractor do this work and therefore bring in the guarantees and against liability or failure in the future, as opposed to having the city install it. So you're looking for some direction, I guess, for our report on how you want to proceed in having this private water service paid for by the city.
Councilor Demery?
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson. Rod, do you know if anybody has spoken to Alistair Davis about this and explained that if, you know, what the difference between having a private contractor do it and having the city do it would be?
Here, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that discussion's been held. I know Alistair was asked to make this request to the city when he came forward with the request for assistance, financial assistance. So certainly it might be a good idea to talk to the gentleman and decide which way. I don't know what his thoughts are in terms of compensation. If he's looking for the city to fully take this on, it may not be advantageous to have him oversee the work. So it depends on what their opinion is on it.
Thank you. Hearing that, I would suggest that, or I would request that we split Mr. Davis's request and go forward and approve the refund of the building fees and defer the water supply line until such time as we've had a chance to have some discussion and do some true costing.
Madam Butters, are you prepared to go along with the suggested amendment?
Yes.
Any discussion on the deferred or split recommendation? Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not so much on the split, but I asked Alistair Davis because when he asked for this again, I thought, you know, like it seems every time a Habitat for Humanity home is built in the city, that he has to come to us and ask for, you know, a review of this and you know. And so I asked him, and he said that he does that in every municipality where they build in Niagara. But he said that in St. Catherine, this is all pre-approved in a policy. It's all pre-approved, so he doesn't have to keep coming back. And I'm just wondering if, you know, we're looking at this to give him a break in this. Should we also be considering this pre-approved policy, which results in him not having to come back to staff and council for each bill for approval? It says, then it just says, regardless of the process, Habitat is very appreciative and thankful for the support and leadership provided by the municipalities. So I guess my question is, yes, like I totally agree with my fellow councillors here that there should be some forgiveness of the building thing. Yes, and I do believe that that we always inspect the water lines and everything that goes in. So a private contractor that they get, because then maybe they'll get a deal. Maybe they'll get a deal from a private contractor because they have a way of winning people over to their support. So maybe he'd get a better deal for that than we would. So perhaps we should split that. But it's something I think we should consider for the future, Your Worship, in that we do have that. Whatever staff can consider that and bring that back to us. What is a good way to resolve this issue? So he's planning to build another one. We know he's got right and Mitchell Street, so they doesn't have to keep coming back to us and asking that question. That's all.
Okay, that's actually
that's separate from
three
this,
issues.
Yeah.
So why don't we deal with the actual recommendation as amended, and then we'll do the reference to the third position that you've taken. Okay, any further discussion, Councillor Bodnar? Yeah, just the building fee. Can you read the motion, Madam Clerk? Can anyone respond to what the building fees are for the Habitat for Humanity build on Bell Street?
Mr. Mayor, I don't know those off the top of my head, so I'm not in a position to comment.
Okay.
We could find out, though, easily.
Yes. Yes. Could you read that for us, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor.
Attention, please. She's reading the new motion.
The motion on the floor is
As
to
amended.
approve the refund of the building permit fees and also to defer the consideration of the request for the water supply line until staff can discuss it and get costing.
So we're ready for the vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Now, do you wish to make a motion direction to staff to prepare a report on a permanent policy?
Yes, I just because of, you know, Alistair's email to me, I'd like us to look at that. Maybe we could consult with St. Catharines and find out what they do, but it's all pre-approved in a policy they approve, so I would like staff to investigate that.
Councillor Hanson.
Mr. Mayor, I had the opportunity to get a hold of the St. Catharines policy and review it. They have a different system there. They have a granting program there. They grant $12,500 to each unit that is developed, and it's split 50-50 between the region and the municipality. So Habitat for Humanity can apply, and it includes the building fees in the granting system. So it's a somewhat different system. It also says in the policy, I noticed that they still have to apply to the city to have those fees waived in each case.
Oh, okay.
But the money is in a grant, rather than going on the levy and saying, or on the water bills, it says that this grant's available and here you are, there's 12.5, and that covers all the costs for it. So it could be the servicing and the building permit fees. So they have that policy in place all the time. They still have to go back and ask for the waiving of those fees out of the $12,500 that's granted.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
that's the system that's in place there.
So we have a request for a staff report on this issue.
Mm-hmm. I would like you just to tell us that in your report.
Okay. Any questions? Any comments? Seconder is Mr. Bodnar?
Yeah, I get to ask some questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Hanson, so you're saying that the City of St. Catharines has a granting. Would that be anything like them applying to what were the hydro funds for, would that be, or could that be included in the report just to see, and give us an idea of what we're talking money-wise here, like worst case scenario? Councilor Dance just looked it up and goes $300 for the building fee for Habitat for Humanity, if that sounds right. That was what was on there.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of money, but could it be more in a certain circumstance? I don't know. Just give us some options if you come back with the, some possible dollar figures and if it would work through the granting.
Mr. Mayor, we can come back with the range of building permit fees, to speak for Dan, a range of fees that might be for a typical place like Bell Street or Mitchell Street, and also get the cost at the same time.
Is that we're making a decision that somebody is going to grant, we're just saying we're going to pay for it, but in reality it's everybody that pays a water bill is paying for that. So I always have a problem making decisions like that for other people who may not want to, donate to Habitat for Humanity, or maybe they'd want to put some sweat equity in instead of dollars, where they could afford that better. So I'll make that decision when the report comes.
Thank you. Any further discussion? There being none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Final item is item number 21. Madam Demery.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Town of Pelham, in support of the City of Kingston, resolution regarding basic income guarantee, request for endorsement and support.
Seconder for the recommendation. Councillor Butters, again. Questions, discussion? Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I brought this forward, firstly, because it's something I believe that is very necessary to move our communities forward, but also in response to a request from Lori Kleinsmith with Bridges Community Health. Near and dear to her heart, something she's been working on quite closely, working to rid this community of poverty, or get as close to it as possible. So this is a very, very important resolution that we do need to get behind and give it full support.
Any other comments or questions? Being none, call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. That would conclude all the items for discussion. The final item, as I see it, is Councillor Bodner's motion regarding the marijuana situation. Madam Clerk, could you craft a resolution satisfactory to your motion, satisfactory to Mr. Bodner's request?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, Councillor Bodner would simply need to provide notice that he is going to introduce a motion at the next council
Okay,
meeting.
at the next council meeting. Thank you, Mr. Bodner.
It has to be a notice of motion? It can't be just a direction of, okay. So if someone opens up before.
Okay. Councillor Bodner, or Councillor Kenny?
Through you, Your Worship, to the clerk, can he just give staff direction on that, or does he have to give notice of motion? That's what I think he was looking for, just giving staff direction. And if it's easier to get it going with staff direction, I would appreciate maybe that.
Well, it was myself that requested the notice of motion.
Oh, well.
However, if it's quicker and simpler, seek staff direction.
I think it's quicker and simpler, but I'll let Ron make that decision because he's.
And you can withdraw.
I'm just going to move my mouth and you keep talking, okay? Because you had a good idea, but no, that was kind of my idea. Just to, if council would agree that this is something maybe we should get in front of, and just give staff direction to, come back with a report on these and see if there's anything we should do or any recommendation they would make. I'd be more than happy with that. I think a number of people out there just want to make sure that we're ahead of the game and got as much information as people that are moving ahead with this. So I would ask, Mr. Mayor, if I could, that we give staff direction to look into what our options are with marijuana dispensaries and if they come back with any recommendations.
Mr. Aquilino?
That's fine, Mr. Mayor. I totally understand what Councillor Bodner's
Okay.
inquiring
And do we
about.
have a time limit on this?
No,
Just to...
not from me, just.
What's reasonable, Mr. Aquilino? We don't want to put the gun to your head, but it is an issue that is going to be upon us sooner than we think, I think.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have a problem getting it to the next council meeting. It's more or less going to be an information report. It's going to require some research, what our current zoning bylaw says, what some of the practices are across the province, nationwide.
Thank you. There be no further items on the agenda. I would entertain. Seconder, Councillor Elliott, vote on that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Consider a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Danch. That we adjourn. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Meeting's adjourned. Move on to the regular meeting of council 03-16, following committee of the whole meeting. It's a regular meeting of council. Call the meeting to order. Are there any addendum items, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
I'd entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? There being none indicated, it shall be so noted. Entertain a motion to adopt the minutes of the special meeting of council 35-15 held on December 11th, 2015, and the regular meeting of council 36-15 held on December 14th, 2015. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Bodner, seconded by Councillor Main. Any questions or discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? All those in favor. Let's see it again, please. Councillor Main, I think you were in favor.
All in favor, yes.
Opposed? Carried. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. There being none, shall indicate accordingly. Approval of items not requiring separate discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Moved by Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Proclamations. There are 3 this evening. Madam Clerk, do you wish to read those out, or shall we? Number A, B, and C, we see them there. Does anyone have any questions or comments? There being none, call for the motion to approve those proclamations. Councillor Bodner. Councillor Butters. Discussion? Being none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item is minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. There's the minutes of the Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting of May 21st, 2015, and draft minutes of the meeting of November 6, 2015. And minutes of the Environmental Advisory Committee meeting of September 9th, 2015, and minutes of the Port Colborne Public Library Board meeting of November 10th, 2015. Could I entertain a motion to approve those minutes? Moved by Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Butters. Any comments or discussion? Being none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Did we see all those in favor to my right? Mr. Main, you were in favor, right? Okay. It's carried then. Consideration of bylaws. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaws be enacted and passed. Bylaw 63210116 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with Neptune Technology for the water meter replacement project. Bylaw 63220216 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 11509781 as amended, respecting lands legally known as part of Lot 30, Concession 2, part of Lot 2 under Reference Plan 59R 12145, municipally known as 485. Pardon me, Mr. Mayor. This bylaw has been withdrawn, and the remaining bylaws will be renumbered to suit as a result of the deferral during the Committee of the Whole meeting. Bylaw 63230316 being a bylaw to confirm appointments to various committees. Bylaw 63240416 being a bylaw to appoint a member to the Downtown Port Colborne Business Improvement Area Board of Management. Bylaw 63250516 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 4310-14602 being a bylaw prescribing on and off street parking for persons with disabilities within the city, and to amend bylaw 60824814 being a bylaw to establish a system for administrative penalties respecting the stopping, standing, and parking of vehicles. Bylaw 63260616 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 4310-14602 being a bylaw prescribing on and off street parking for persons with disabilities within the city. Bylaw 63270716 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 629912515 being a bylaw to establish an economic development advisory committee. Bylaw 63280816 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with Castle Plumbing and Heating regarding tender 2015-24 for Colborne Public Library and Roseland Center HVAC replacements. And finally, bylaw 63290916 being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its meeting of January 25th, 2016.
Do we have a mover for all the bylaws? Councillor Bodner, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Any comments or questions, discussion? There being none, call for the question. Do we approve those bylaws as listed? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. At this time, I entertain a motion for adjournment. Councillor Danch. Seconder, Councillor Butters. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much for your attention this evening. I look forward